It's really scary. After leaving the range of 4th Division, Muyang patted his chest and wiped the non-existent sweat on his head. There was a hint of joy in his tone. The tragic experience of being treated by Unohana Retsu many years ago had left a shadow in his heart. Even now, he still had a lingering fear. What is really scary? Just as Muyang patted his chest and muttered to himself, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. "Phew, Kuraku, you really scared me to death." He looked at Kuraku's Shunsui standing behind him with an unhappy expression. Muyang's tone was very bad. Why was he frightened one after another today? What's wrong? Kuraku's Shunsui looked at Muyang strangely. With his vigilance, he would not be scared because of his sudden approach, but the expression on his face was not fake at all. It was really strange. "It's nothing." Muyang clearly noticed his own loss of composure. He adjusted his mood and his expression became normal. Muyang glanced at Kuraku's Shunsui and changed the topic. "Speaking of which, what are you doing here? Are you slacking again? Aren't you afraid that your Nanao will teach you a lesson?" "How could that be?" Kuraku's Shunsui waved his hand. "I am not the kind of person who will be lazy. Besides, my Nanao-chan is not the kind of person who will teach me a lesson. Nanao-chan is very gentle." "Is that so?" Feeling the Ryuryoku who was trying to hide behind the two of them, Muyang's mouth showed a faint smile. Was he following his captain? What an interesting guy. Aware of the smile on Muyang's lips, Kuraku's Shunsui gave him a look, and Muyang's eyes showed a trace of understanding. "Since we ran into each other, come with me to the 12th Division." 12th Division, what's wrong? When he heard Muyang talk about business, Kuraku Shansui's face did not change, but his tone was much more serious. "Go see how the research progress of Captain Kuratsuchi is going, and I always feel that something has happened in the modern world. If it is possible, maybe I can persuade the old man Yama to send his troops to the modern world with me." "Oh. It seems that you really feel that something big has happened." "Well, I am a little uneasy. Although Aizen's Jayaku is a few months away from awakening, I always feel that I seem to have neglected something. I am a little worried." "Oh, we are here. Let's go in and have a look first. If there is anything, we will talk about it later. Captain Kuraku, Mr. Kimura." Seeing the two people coming to the door, the team at the door of 12th Division quickly saluted. Although they did not know Muyang before, they still heard about Muyang from some places. They were still in awe of this person who used to be the deputy captain of 12th Division. "Ah, is Captain Kuratsuchi here?" "Yes, the captain is inside now. Please come in." After getting the answer from the guard, Muyang and Kuraku Shunsui walked inside. "Captain Kuratsuchi, how is your research going?" Walking into the research room and looking at Kuratsuchi Mayuri standing in front of the big screen, Muyang asked first. "Oh, so it's you, a man who makes people unhappy." When he heard Muyang's question, Kuratsuchi Mayuri did not answer. Instead, he first turned his head to look at Muyang, and then his eyes turned and he said with a hesitant face. Seeing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's rolling eyes, Muyang's face was black. This guy really had a child's temper. "Don't worry, my research has ended just now. I am going to have someone submit the report to head captain. If you want to unlock the deep sleep state of Jayaku sealed in the soul, no matter what method you use, it will take at least 4 months to completely awaken him." 4 months. Hearing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's words, Muyang nodded slightly. There was no such detail in his memory. If not for the research of Kuratsuchi, he could not know the exact time. It has been a month since Aizen defected, that is to say, there is at least 3 months before the complete awakening of Jayaku. If Aizen's Jayaku cannot be fully awakened, he cannot gather his subordinates. Before that, even if he wants to move, it is not possible. Is the decisive time in winter? There is not much time. After Kuraku Shunsui analyzed it, he let out a sigh, and the tone was rare with a trace of caution. The war could not be avoided in the end. Wait. No. Hearing Kyoraku Shunsui's words, a lightning suddenly flashed in Muyang's mind. Aizen can't gather his subordinates. How is it possible? He had established Las Noches in Hueco Mundo many years ago, and once selected Espada number 10, but many people were eliminated later. What is going on? Hurry up and remember. Muyang stood there, constantly searching for the memories in his brain, but after all, the time interval was too long. The memories of these things in his brain had long been blurred. He only remembered some general characters and major events. He had long forgotten some details. What's wrong, Kimura? Seeing Muyang suddenly close his eyes and stand there motionless, Kyoraku Shunsui asked. Hearing Kyoraku Shunsui's voice, Muyang opened his eyes. Although he was not clear about those details, there was one thing that Muyang could be sure of, that was that Aizen had gathered enough subordinates at this time. I want to. Ding. 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 Just as Muyang was about to speak, a sharp cry suddenly sounded. What's wrong? When he heard the sudden alarm, Kuratsuchi Mayuri, who was looking at the big screen in front of him, suddenly changed his face and turned to look at the direction where several members were responsible. There's a reaction. Coordinate axis 3600 4000, Tokyo. East of Kakuzacho, please dispatch and capture. Oh, did it appear? Kuratsuchi Mayuri showed a trace of excitement on his face, turned around and walked over, taking over the computer in the hands of the team members, and a trace of expectation flashed in his eyes. I don't know what kind of goods it is. Kyoraku Shunsui and Muyang looked at each other and followed, standing behind Kuratsuchi Mayuri, watching his hands quickly tapping on the screen. Hey, how is it? Looking at the things on the screen, Kyoraku Shunsui reached out to Kuratsuchi Mayuri, who was standing beside him, and asked in a low voice. Kuratsuchi Mayuri looked at the data on the screen in front of him, and his eyes were full of shock. When he heard Kyoraku Shunsui's question, he subconsciously replied, there are two. From Ryuryoka's concentration and stability, it should be an adult. How can it be? Hearing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's answer, even Kyoraku Shunsui can't help but let out a cry of surprise. Isn't it said that Aizen's Jayaku needs more than 4 months to fully awaken? Why does he have a body shape now? It seems that the situation is a little serious. I think we should go and talk to Commander Yamamoto in person. What do you think, Captain Kuratsuchi? Let's go, anyway, we have to hold a captain meeting after we finish talking. Kuratsuchi Mayuri stood up and telling them to analyze and deal with the information they got before, and then went to the direction of 1st Division with Kyoraku Shunsui and Muyang. Humph. If I remember correctly, you are no longer the captain of Godii 13th. I don't know what you mean by following us to 1st Division. The former 10th Division captain, Muyang. Just 2 steps, Kuratsuchi Mayuri turned to look at Muyang and said with a dissatisfied face. It seemed that he had a deep resentment for Muyang. When did I offend this narrow-minded guy? Hearing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's provocation, Muyang felt helpless in his heart. Although in terms of combat strength, even if there were several Kuratsuchi Mayuri, they were not Muyang's opponent. However, the opponent's means of defense were really shocking. No one knew when they would be tricked by him. Therefore, Muyang had always been respectful to this guy. He did not expect that he would actually provoke him. He was really unlucky. Thinking that he might be tricked by Kuratsuchi Mayuri, Muyang subconsciously pulled away from him. However, in the eyes of the other party, it was as if they looked down on him, making Kuratsuchi Mayuri even more dissatisfied with Muyang. This guy is really an unpleasant man, just like that guy Kisuke. Feeling that Kuratsuchi Mayuri's malice seemed to have increased, Muyang wanted to cry but had no tears. Why was he hated by this guy for no reason? Later, he had to check if he had put something disgusting on his body. I won't participate in the captain meeting, just after the meeting, there is something I had to explain to head captain. Is that so? Kurotsuchi Mayuri replied indifferently and then quickened his pace to the direction of First Division. What an unexpected disaster. Looking at Kurotsuchi Mayuri's back, Muyang secretly shook his head. It seemed that he had to pay attention in the future, so as not to be caught in a mess by him without knowing anything. A body? Hearing Kurotsuchi Mayuri's report, Yamamoto Genryusai's eyes opened slightly, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. The development of the matter seemed to be beyond their expectations. Unexpectedly, Aizen's men now have a body-shape Erincar, and they actually sent it to human world. It seems that the previous plan is not good, and it is necessary to redeploy. With a decision in mind, Yamamoto Genryusai slammed the cane in his hand on the ground, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Announce it, immediately convene a captain meeting to discuss about Aizen and Erincar. Modern World, Ding Ding District. Boom. This Ryuryoku. Feeling the sudden appearance of the powerful Ryuryoku in the outskirts of the city, the members of the Ding Ding district who were doing their own things all stopped what they were doing and looked in the direction where Ryuryoku had appeared in the distance with solemn eyes. It can't be wrong, it's Erincar. His eyes swept over Stark sitting on the side of the bar. Hirako Shinji was sure that they had been living with Stark all the time, and he was familiar with Erincar Ryuryoku. Kosu. I know. Hearing Hirako Shinji's cry, Suzuki Kosu closed her eyes slightly and stretched out her hand to fiddle a few times in the air. Found it. Suzuki Kosu suddenly opened her eyes, holding a crystal silk thread in her hand. Then her left hand formed a seal, and a clear scene appeared on the wall of the coffee shop. Is this subordinate sent by Aizen? Everyone looked at the two people who appeared on the screen. One was a muscular man, and the other was a thin man with a gloomy temperament and a handsome face. Although she did not feel anything from looking at them like this, the Ryuryoku, who came through the air, clearly told everyone present that these two were definitely not easy to deal with. They are Kurosaki Ichigo's companions. What are they doing? Lisa frowned when she saw Orihime and Sato Yasutora appear. It can't be. With their strength, they are not enough. If this goes on, they will die. Seeing that Orihime and Sato Yasutora actually wanted to challenge the two Erincar who appeared, Hirako Shinji said with a little worry. He had a good impression of these two people. If he just watched them die like this, he would feel uneasy. Wait. Shinji, what are you going to do? Isn't it obvious? To save them, of course. Hirako Shinji took his Zanpakuto and put it on his shoulder. After hearing Hyora's words, he answered matter-of-factly. Of course I know that you are going to save them, so I asked why did you save them? Hearing Hirako Shinji's answer, Hyora's face was full of blue veins, the corners of her eyes were slightly twitching, and she took a cup and smashed it on the face of Hirako Shinji. Ah! It's so hot. Hiyori, you bastard, there's hot coffee here. Humph. Hiyori turned her head proudly and looked at Orihime who was doing his best to save Sato on the screen. We are not Shinigami now, and they are not our companions, so there is no reason to save them at all. Besides, hasn't someone already gone to save them? As he spoke, Hiyori pointed at Kurosaki Ichigo, who had elegantly blocked Yami's attack. The expression on his face was slightly displeased. Hiyori did not have any good feelings towards this guy who had actually rejected their invitation. This little brat actually rejected our invitation. How hateful. I don't think this guy has anything worth being invited to. That guy seems pretty strong. Kyuna Mashiro pointed at Kurosaki Ichigo, who had casually cut off one of Yami's arms, and said to Hiyori who was next to her. She was so simple-minded that she did not think how much of a blow her words would bring to Hiyori. As a veteran Shinigami, she could not compare to a guy who had just become Shinigami for a few months. Where had he lived for the past few hundred years? Don't worry, little day. Your face suddenly turned ashen white. Kuna Mashiro glanced at Hiyori, whose face suddenly turned ashen, and still asked in confusion. Nothing. Looking at Kurosaki Ichigo, who was showing great power in the picture in front of her, Hiyori's tone was listless. She was really shocked. But then he saw that Kurosaki Ichigo suddenly froze and was beaten up by dense teeth. The expression on Hiyori's face suddenly became active. She swept away the previous depressed look and pointed to Kurosaki Ichigo in the picture and shouted. Look! I told you that this kid is a useless guy. He was actually beaten up like this. It's really embarrassing. I don't think he has the qualifications to join us at all. Hey, is it okay if I say this? This guy won't die, right? Rose glanced at Kurosaki Ichigo who was being beaten up, and his tone was slightly worried. If this guy was really beaten to death like this, it would really be bad. It's okay. Kisuke and Yoruchi have already went there. Hearing Rose's question, Suzuki Kusu, who had been silent before, suddenly opened her mouth and said. Really, Kisuke and the two of them went over. In this case, we will just watch here. Feeling that Kisuke and Yoruchi were moving forward quickly, Hirako Shinji put down his hanging heart. Since Kisuke went, there was nothing to worry about. Although the two Arrancar were very strong, it was still a little not enough compared with Kisuke and Yoruchi. Come to think of it, Stark, what do you think of the strength of these two Arrancar? When he heard Hirako Shinji's question, Stark rubbed his head. I haven't fought them, it's hard to say. Hey, your answer is too perfunctory. Hirako Shinji's face collapsed. Stark, you are a fool, how can you answer like this? This guy will never be your opponent. You are the strongest Arrancar. We are independent Arrancar, and we are absolutely not the same level as them who don't know what that means to Arrancar. Hearing Stark's answer, Lillinette suddenly jumped to his side and knocked his head with dissatisfaction. As the first known person who broke her own face, she has always been proud of this and has been attacking other guys with this. Are you provoking me? Sure enough, after hearing Lillinette's words, Mila Rose, who stood on the other side, changed her expression and looked at Lillinette with bad eyes. Then, she said with a curl of his lips, forget it, I won't argue with you, kid, even your body has not fully developed. What? You bastard. When she heard Mila Rose mention her sore spot, Lillinette's face immediately turned red with shame. She looked at the few people standing there fiercely. Her eyes swept over their chests, then looked at his own flat chest. Lillinette suddenly felt a sense of defeat. This scale was indeed incomparable. But SH turned her eyes to look at the scale of Hiyori's chest that had not interacted much with her. Lillinette felt a sense of relief in his heart. There was someone accompanying her. Sensing the intent in Lillinette's eyes, a trace of embarrassment flashed across Hiyori's face. What are you looking at? Little brat, even if you look at me again, I'm bigger than you. As she spoke, Hiyori puffed out her chest. Yes, it was indeed a bit bigger than Lillinette's. At least it was a bit curved. Hearing the noise of the people beside him, Suzuki Kusu was speechless. What were they talking about? Did these guys not feel nervous at all? Right now, there was a battle going on in another place. The battlefield. Kisuke looked at the Arrancar that used only one hand to shake off his attack. A trace of seriousness flashed in his eyes. This guy was completely different from the big guy from before. Not only was his strength much stronger, but his mind was also much more mature. He was a cold and quiet type of person. This kind of guy was the hardest to deal with. Ulquiorra. Looking at Ulquiorra who suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked the attack of Kisuke, Yami shouted, but before he finished his words, he was knocked back a few steps by Ulquiorra's elbow. Cough cough, what are you doing, Ulquiorra? Yami bent over and covered his abdomen, looking at Ulquiorra standing in front of him with a painful face. I think you have been knocked out, Yami. You actually began to fight before you knew the identity of the enemy. I have told you to check the strength of the other party before fighting. They are Kisuke and Yoruchi Shihoin. With your level, you are not their opponent. Ulquiorra glanced at his injured palm, his eyes showing a hint of vigilance. Just a casual blow had actually hurt himself. Sure enough, he was worthy of being someone that Lord Aizen specifically warned. It was just that he did not meet the other person Lord Aizen mentioned, and he did not know how strong he would be. However, he stretched out his finger and pointed in the void. A dark crack quietly appeared, and behind the dark crack, there was an ominous aura. What is it? Do you want to escape? Seeing the black chamber behind the two, Yoruchi opened her mouth. The vigilance in her eyes was not relaxed at all. For an enemy of this level, the slightest carelessness could not be allowed. This doesn't seem like a provocation you would do, Yoruchi Shihoin. Although he opened the black chamber, Ulquiorra's eyes never left Kisuke and Yoruchi in front of him. He had just personally experienced the power of these two people. As long as there was the slightest bit of carelessness, he would definitely die. With the two of you, if you want to fight us while protecting the two good-for-nothings who almost died, you should know who the situation is better for. Ulquiorra looked at Yoruchi without any emotion on his face. The current task has been completed. I will go back and tell Lord Aizen that the Shinigami agent he is paying attention to is just a waste with no value to be killed. Kisuke and Yoruchi looked at the two people walking into the black chamber and stood still. In the case of protecting the three of them, it was not a wise decision to fight with two unknown Arrancar. Even if it is a waste, it is better to clean them up now. Just as Ulquiorra and Yami stepped into the black chamber, a voice sounded from inside. What? Hearing the voice that suddenly came from the black cavity, Yoruchi and Kisuke's face suddenly changed. It was the enemy's reinforcement. Now, the three of them had lost their combat ability. It was almost impossible to fight with only the two of them to protect the three of them. Moreover, no one knew what kind of guy would come to reinforce. He quickly analyzed the current situation in his mind. Kisuke stared at the two Arrancar in front of him, hoping to see something from their faces. Ulquiorra heard the voice from the black cavity behind him, his eyes flashed slightly, but there was no emotion on his face, which made it impossible to see what he was thinking in his heart. But Yami, who was standing next to him, suddenly had a flash of unhappiness in his eyes after hearing the voice. TSK, this voice, so it's Grimmjow. Ha! A wanton and arrogant figure stepped out of the black cavity. His sky-blue hair soared into the sky, and his blue eyes were full of wanton arrogance. There was a smirk on the corner of his mouth, and the half-mask on his face made him feel a bit brutal. Oh, Yami, even your arm was cut off by someone. What a useless guy. I think you will have to retreat from the Espada after I go back. A guy like you can only embarrass us Espada. Walking out of the black chamber, Grimmjow glanced at Yami's broken right hand and sneered. You bastard. I will kill you. Hearing Grimmjow's mockery of him, Yami's face flashed a touch of anger. This guy actually came up and exposed his scar. As he said, Yami put a hand on his own Zanpakuto, raised his foot and took a step forward, and a stronger Ryoryoku was vaguely exposed. Wait a minute, Yami. Reaching out to stop Yami who wanted to start, Ulquiorra turned his eyes to Grimmjow. There was no emotional fluctuation in his eyes, as if nothing could make his mood change. Then, can we hear your purpose, Grimmjow? If Lord Aizen knows that you act without permission, he will not let you go easily. Well, calling Lord Aizen is really smooth. I think you have completely become Aizen's lackey, Ulquiorra. It was you who was too rude. Grimmjow. Ulquiorra looked at Grimmjow, his face was calm, and there was no emotion in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Although it is not appropriate to interrupt you now, but don't you think too much of us? Just as Ulquiorra and Grimmjow are confronting each other, Yoruchi has sent Sado and Orihime to a safe place. As for Kurosaki Ichigo, he has recovered and insists to stay at the scene, and Yoruchi does not stop him. "Oh, are you Kisuke?" Grimjow looks at the person standing in front of him, green clothes, the iconic wooden clog and hat. This guy is the Kisuke that Aizen said to be careful. "Oh. Everyone knows me. It seems that I have been famous." Kisuke pressed his hat with one hand and his eyes were uncertain. No one knew what he was thinking. "It seems that you are Kisuke. That's good. I will kill you," Grimjow said with a proud smile. "Wait, Grimjow." Before Okiura finished his words, Grimjow rushed out and punched at Kisuke's head. Boom! After a loud bang, in the dust, Grimjow's body flew back faster than before, leaving a long mark in the woods behind him. What a fool! Okiura stood still, watching Grimjow fly back under the blow, and softly spit out a few words. Even he was injured when facing Kisuke just now. Grimjow actually rushed straight up like this. It is too stupid. Well, actually I can do it myself, Yoruchi. Looking at Yoruchi who stood in front of him and sent Grimjow flying with a punch, Kisuke waved his hand and said. Although it was a playful tone, there was a trace of worry in Kisuke's eyes. He noticed that Yoruchi's left hand and left leg were a bit uncoordinated. It was obvious that she had been injured in the previous battle. It is really strong. There is such a force. Standing up from the ground, Grimjow wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and the fighting desire in his eyes became stronger and stronger. This kind of opponent was interesting. Bang! A powerful Ryoryoku burst out from Grimjow's body, blowing all the dust around, revealing the figure of Grimjow standing in the middle. I will kill you, Yoruchi Shihuin. As his voice fell, Grimjow's figure suddenly turned into a lightning bolt and rushed to Yoruchi. The moment he rushed over, Zanpakuto, who was hanging on his waist, was instantly unsheathed. Dang! Just as Grimjow was about to rush to Yoruchi, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The black Zanpakuto in his hand was horizontal and blocked his attack. I won't let you. Looking at the person in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo said firmly. Feeling the power coming from Zanpakuto, a trace of disdain flashed in Grimjow's eyes. When he saw the face of the person in front of him, his face showed even more undisguised disdain. Get out of the way, kid. With a force of his hand, Grimjow directly threw Kurosaki Ichigo and Zanpakuto in his hand to the side. He raised his left leg and suddenly kicked Kurosaki Ichigo in the stomach, sending him flying. Grimjow continued to chop off Zanpakuto's head that was aimed at Yoruchi. Shunko! A powerful force suddenly exploded in front of Grimjow. Grimjow only felt a strong force coming from Zanpakuto in his hand. The Zanpakuto in his hand cut down uncontrollably, and his whole body fell forward. Not good. Feeling his body fall forward uncontrollably, Grimjow suddenly felt bad, if his body lost balance in the battle and fell to the enemy. Sure enough, just as this thought flashed through Grimjow's mind, a foot wrapped in white lightning became bigger and bigger in his eyes, and a sharp breath pierced his face. Seeing that Grimjow was about to be kicked by Yoruchi, Okiura could not ignore it. His body flashed and instantly appeared next to the two people. His Zanpakuto, which had been unsheathed at an unknown time, chopped at Yoruchi's body. If Yoruchi wanted to continue to attack Grimjow, it was bound to be cut by Okiura. Seeing Okiura's action, Yoruchi stopped the attack without thinking. She stepped on the ground and immediately retreated, exposing Kisuke standing behind her. Seeing Yoruchi withdraw the attack and retreat, Grimjow just felt relaxed in his heart. He heard a voice that urged him to die. Cry, Hongji. With a sharp cry, a layer of red light appeared on the Zanpakuto of Kisuke not far in front of him. Then with the swing of Kisuke's knife, a red slash flew toward the head of Grimjow. There was no time to think. The moment he saw the body of Kisuke, Grimjow stretched out his right hand and a red light appeared in his palm. Zero. Boom. Shwa. After the successful attack, Kisuke's figure flashed and appeared next to Yoruchi, who had been retreating before. Has it been resolved? How is that possible? It's impossible for him to only be at this level. Hearing Yoruichi's question, Kisuke said with a smile, but his eyes were full of seriousness. He did not expect the battle to break out like this, and it seemed that it could not be solved in a short time. I caught you. Just as Yoruchi and Kisuke were looking ahead vigilantly, Yami suddenly flashed behind them and smashed his fist down. On his fist, a layer of red Ryuryoku covered it. How could you catch it so easily? Kisuke chuckled and flashed away from Yami's attack range with Yoruchi. Is that so? Just as Yoruchi avoided the dense attack, before her feet fell, she heard a calm voice suddenly sounded in her ear. When? Hearing the voice in her ear, Yoruchi was shocked. She did not notice the trace of the other party's movement at all, and he appeared behind her so quickly. However, I am the god of Flash Yoruchi. Yoruchi moved her foot and was about to leave in an instant, but just as she raised her foot, a pain suddenly came from her left foot. Shit! The left foot that was injured just now. Seeing that the woman in front of him swayed for a moment but did not leave, Okuiora, although slightly puzzled in his heart, Zanpakuto in his hand did not hesitate to swing down at Yoruchi's body. Not good. Yoruchi. Seeing Yoruchi's body swayed, but still stopped in place and did not leave, Kisuke panicked. It seemed that the left foot injured in the previous battle affected the battle. Anxious, Kisuke moved his body and rushed to block Okuiora's attack. Stay here. Just as Kisuke was about to move, Grimmjow, who was not far away, stood up, grabbed his Zanpakuto and rushed to chop at Kisuke's head. Damn it! Kisuke looked at Yoruchi under the blade of Okuiora not far away, and then looked at Grimmjow in front of him, his eyes flashed a trace of fierceness. Damn it! Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been kicked away by Grimmjow, struggled to get up from the ground and shook his head hard. My body is out of control, and... Get out of the way. Let me do it. A voice full of tyranny came from Ichigo's mind, and then a violent fluctuation of emotion spread into his mind. His already somewhat uncontrollable body suddenly felt even more difficult to control. Why did I choose this time? Do I not want to give my body to you and want me to die? Kurosaki Ichigo thought in his heart. The more he used his strength, the closer he was to being devoured by the void in his body. The power he originally wanted to use to protect his companions had now become the burden of his companions because he used his strength. Yoruchi. Hearing the sudden voice of Kisuke, Kurosaki Ichigo was slightly stunned. He turned his gaze slightly and saw that Yoruchi was now about to be slashed by the Arrancar, and Kisuke was also blocked by the blue hair later. Damn it, Miss Yoruchi! Kurosaki Ichigo shouted. Under a strong will, his body recovered in an instant. Kurosaki Ichigo stepped forward to help the two people. Brat, go to hell. Before Kurosaki Ichigo could run forward, Yami's huge body suddenly appeared in front of him, and his left fist smashed down on Kurosaki Ichigo's head with a huge momentum. Get lost. Getsuga Tensho. Almost subconsciously, Kurosaki Ichigo used the only move taught to him by Zangetsu, Getsuga Tensho. A black Ryuryoku suddenly appeared, attached to Kurosaki Ichigo's Zanpakuto. The evil black Ryuryoku gave people an ominous feeling, full of a desire to destroy, as if it wanted to destroy everything. Bang! With a loud sound, Kurosaki Ichigo's crescent moon met Yami's fist. The black crescent moon effortlessly tore apart Yami's siro and slashed at Yami's fist, leaving a deep wound on his hand. Then, he was sent flying. Just as Kurosaki Ichigo sent Yami flying with a slash. On the other side, Kisuke also sent Grimmjow flying. Yoruchi. Just as he pushed Grimmjow back, Kisuke immediately turned to look at another battle. Yoruchi, whose left and left hands were already injured, could retreat in the face of a powerful opponent. Pucci. Just as Kisuke turned his eyes to Yoruchi, Zanpakuto in Okuyura's hand suddenly swung down and mercilessly cut Yoruchi's body. A spray of blood suddenly sprayed out, and behind the floating blood was the shocked face of Yoruchi. The blade cut into Yoruchi's body, but there was no joy in Okuyura's eyes. Instead, he frowned slightly. Although there was a spray of blood in front of his eyes, the feeling from Zanpakuto told him that he did not hit just now. Secret footwork, of the Shihuin. A touch of orange light flashed. Yoruchi appeared in front of Kurosaki Ichigo, with a confident smile on the corner of her mouth. God of Flash, Yoruchi is definitely not so easy to deal with. Oh, I was really worried just now. Yoruchi, I thought you were killed. In a flash, Kisuke appeared next to Yoruchi. He pressed his hat with one hand and Zanpakuto with the other. He looked at Yoruchi, who was standing beside him, with a relaxed expression in his eyes. Bang! Yoruchi withdrew her fist and looked at Kisuke, who was standing beside her. Are you doubting my speed? Yoruchi asked. These two guys. Okuyura stood in the same place and looked at Kisuke and Yoruchi, who were laughing and playing not far away. Yoruchi is worthy of being mentioned by Lord Aizen. That speed is absolutely not ordinary. The probe nerves did not catch her movements at that moment. Also, Kisuke and Lord Aizen are afraid of people. Grimmjow is not his opponent at all. The eyes turned and fell on Kurosaki Ichigo behind Yoruchi and Kisuke. Okuyura's eyes flashed a trace of thinking. Although there was no direct response before, but Kurosaki Ichigo's black crescent moon actually destroyed the hidden bullets in a flash and sent his whole person flying. Is this still the waste who was beaten by Yami? Speaking of which, after fighting for so long, don't introduce yourself, Baronkar. Kisuke turned to look at the three people in front of him. He tightened his grip on Zanpakuto. Although his tone was very relaxed, his gaze under the shadow of his hat was particularly sharp. Grimmjow. Grimmjow, who had been left with a wound on his chest by Kisuke, stood up from the ground and walked to the front of Yoruchi and Kisuke. Although his chest was full of blood, his eyes became more fanatical. My name is Grimmjow Jigerjax. I know you, Kisuke Urahara, Yoruchi Shihuin, and Kurosaki Ichigo. I will kill you. Hearing Grimmjow's clamor, Kisuke and Yoruchi's face remained unchanged. They were not the kind of people who lost their minds because of a few words of the opponent. Enough, Grimmjow, back off. Just as Grimmjow provoked Kisuke and Yoruchi, Okuyura appeared in front of him and said indifferently. Get out of the way, Okuyura. You are not qualified to order me. Grimmjow looked at Okuyura beside him with a bad face. If not for the enemy now, he would have rushed to fight with Okuyura. For him to occupy the position of number 4. Grimmjow has been unhappy for a long time. Stop, Grimmjow, the three of us can't keep the three of them, even if there is a useless trash among the three of them, and it is not the time for the war to start. Ha! 3 people. Don't joke, we are not 3 people. Saying this, Grimmjow's face showed a strange smile. Hearing Grimmjow's words, the faces of Kisuke and Yoruchi suddenly changed. Sato and Orihime. It is too late to realize it now. I think they should have been killed by now. What? Hearing Grimmjow's affirmative words, Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to see Orihime and Sato, and then his Ryuryoku suddenly released a violent fluctuation, and a violent Ryuryoku seemed to be ready to move. Oh, is this guy you are talking about? He was killed in an instant. He is really fragile, you break the mask. Just as the clarity in Kurosaki Ichigo's eyes was gradually swallowed by the darkness from the depths of his heart, a frivolous voice suddenly sounded, stopping the darkness from spreading in his eyes. What? Seeing an unfamiliar figure appear, before Grimmjow could say anything, he saw someone throw something at him. Corolla. Seeing the corpse in front of him, Grimmjow's face changed. He did not expect that Corolla, who was sent by him to kill the 2 humans, would be killed so easily. They did not even feel the fluctuation of Ryuryoku. Shinji. Seeing the person who appeared, a trace of surprise flashed in Kurosaki Ichigo's eyes. He didn't expect that it was actually this guy who had been inviting him to join some shady visored group to save Inoue and Sado. Don't thank me. I just don't want to see such a cute Orihime get killed. Ah, long time no see, Shinji. Also, it's great that you can come. Looking at Hirako Shinji who was carrying Zanpakuto with an indifferent face, Kisuke said, and his tone was obviously much more relaxed. I already said that I just don't want to see the cute Orihime get killed. Hirako Shinji walked to the three of them and looked at the three masked men in different shapes. His eyes were still indifferent. Although these three people were very strong, they were far weaker than the two Arrancar in their shop. This level was not enough to make him feel nervous. You bastard. Seeing Hirako Shinji look down on him, Grimmjow's eyes burned with anger. Although he did not feel much about the death of Corolla, but the other person's contempt for him was really unbearable. Kisuke, is it okay to fight here? As if he did not feel Grimmjow's anger, Hirako Shinji turned to Kisuke beside him and asked. Don't worry, Tessai has already fixed the battle area. Kisuke pressed his hat and said in a relaxed tone. If not for the Tessai staying in the store to fix the place where the battle was going to take place, the Ryuryoku revealed during the battle was enough to make many human souls disperse. This level of Ryuryoku was definitely not something ordinary humans could withstand. You bastard, I'm going to kill you. After being ignored by Hirako Shinji again and again, Grimmjow finally could not bear it. He clenched Zanpakuto in his hand, and a strong Ryuryoku suddenly burst out. Schwa! You are too noisy. Fighting is not said by mouth. Boom! Hirako Shinji tapped his feet, and his body instantly appeared in front of Grimmjow, and Zanpakuto in his hand suddenly chopped down. TCH, that's all. Hirako Shinji said with disdain. Is that so? Hearing Grimmjow's words, Hirako Shinji asked with a strange smile on his face. At the same time, his empty hand suddenly put on his face. This posture, what is he trying to do? Seeing Hirako Shinji's action, Grimmjow felt inexplicably tight in his heart. Schwa! As Hirako Shinji's hand slid down in front of him, a mask appeared on his face. At the same time, there was also a powerful Ryuryoku, mixed with the feelings of Hollow and Shinigami, full of destructive power. Nanny? Hollow mask? Seeing the mask that had suddenly appeared on Hirako Shinji's face, Grimmjow said in disbelief. His eyes were full of shock, and the shock in his heart had not subsided. He felt a strong force coming from Zanpakuto in his hand. His arms suddenly exerted force, and Grimmjow was sent flying. Before Yami and Okiura on the side made a move, Hirako Shinji's figure flashed and reappeared in front of Grimmjow. He leaned in front of Grimmjow and said in a strange tone, now is a battle, not a time to be in a daze, Mr. Arrancar. Boom! The Zanpakuto in Hirako Shinji's hand suddenly waved and smashed on Grimmjow's body, leaving a huge hole in the ground. Stepping forward, before Okiura and Yami rushed over, Hirako Shinji's every move seemed to have predicted the action of the other side, and it seemed to be relaxed. A sound appeared in front of Grimmjow, but it still could not keep up with Hirako Shinji. He glanced at Grimmjow lying on the ground, and after making sure that he was not injured, Okiura turned his eyes to Hirako Shinji, and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. This guy, the mask on his face, and the aura that was similar to that of a hollow, what was his identity? After taking a few steps back, Hirako Shinji did not stop. Just as Okiura was looking at him, Hirako Shinji held his Zanpakuto in his hand and pointed it in their direction. A touch of red Ryuryoku gathered in front of his fist, emitting a powerful Ryuryoku fluctuation. Is this Zero? Seeing the red Ryuryoku compressed thing in front of Hirako Shinji's hand, Okiura's pupil suddenly contracted. This guy, not only the mask on his face, but also Ryuryoku, who was similar to Hollow, could actually use Zero that only Hollow could use. What was his identity? Although his heart was full of doubts, Okuyura's face did not show any hint of it. The other hand that had been stuffed in his trouser pocket slowly reached out and pointed a finger at Hirako Shinji. A touch of ink-colored Ryuryoku quickly gathered in front of his finger. Zero. Okuyura. Almost at the same time, Hirako Shinji released his own Zero. Two powerful forces collided in the air and released a strong fluctuation, destroying all the trees in the surrounding forest. So strong. He reached out to cover up the flying sand in front of him. Kurosaki Ichigo looked at the movement caused by the battle between the two people in front of him, and his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of yearning. Is this the power of hollowification? Can I obtain such power after controlling the hollow in my body? If I can also be like him, I can protect my companions and family. That guy, Hirako Shinji, as long as I carefully watch his battle and pay attention to observation, I can know how he controlled the hollowification. Kurosaki Ichigo widened his eyes and looked at Hirako Shinji in front of him. The smoke had not dispersed, and he had already fought with someone again. However, this time the one who fought him was not Grimmjow, but the Okuyura who had been calm all the time. Clang, clang, clang. The figures of the two people in the air flashed from time to time, and at the same time, accompanied by the sound of blades and swords clashing, the aftermath of the battle blew the forest below. Although he said it was because he don't want to see Miss Orihime be killed, he's unexpectedly full of energy. What a strange man. Looking at Shinji who was fighting with Okuyura over there, Kisuke sighed, then turned his head and glanced at the figure who appeared behind him at some point. But since Shinji is so enthusiastic, I am really embarrassed to not be serious. Don't you think so? Mr. Ehrenkar, Grimmjow. TCH. Grimmjow spat on the ground with a bit of arrogance on his face. Although he did not gain any advantage in the battle with Kisuke before, Grimmjow was not discouraged at all. Speaking of which, there is something I care a little about. Is there any special meaning for the number 6 on your back? Kisuke looked at Grimmjow and said with a trace of exploration in his tone. He did not know why, but he always felt that the number must have something different. If he could know what the meaning of the number was, he should be able to understand the strength situation of Aizen. Are you talking about this? Grimmjow turned around and revealed the number at the back of his waist. After seeing the certainty in Kisuke's eyes, Grimmjow's face showed a smile. If you want to know, I will tell you after I kill you. With a loud shout, Grimmjow waved his Zanpakuto and rushed to Kisuke. There is really no way. It seems that I can only defeat you and then talk about it. Looking at Grimmjow who rushed to him, Kisuke's face showed a trace of seriousness. Hueco Mundo, las noches. Aizen sat there, holding his head with one hand, looking at the screen in front of him, with a playful smile on his face, the fingers of the other hand tapping on the seat unconsciously. What are you going to do now, Captain Aizen? Ikamaru Jin turned his line of sight from the screen and asked Aizen, who was sitting next to him. Although Grimmjow privately ran over to provoke the battle against my plan, it also let me find some interesting things from here. Aizen looked at the screen in front of him and said intently. At this time, the screen showed that it was the 4 people of Ehrenkar trio who were fighting in the human world. Are you talking about Hirako Shinji who is hiding in the modern world? Ikamaru Jin asked with a smile on his face. When he saw the captain 100 years ago, he really had a strange feeling. No, they have been hiding in the modern world for a long time. I just have been too lazy to pay attention to them. In the end, they are just a group of failed experiments, and there is no value for me to continue to pay attention to. What I care about is another thing. Oh, what is it? Even Hirako Shinji has appeared until now, but Muyang has not appeared yet. It seems that the news from Soul Society is right. Muyang is still staying in Soul Society now. Although I don't know his purpose, I have to say that now is a chance. A chance? If we send a few more Ehrenkar force to human world now, Soul Society will definitely send a reinforcement team to human world, and Muyang will definitely return to human world together. We just need to do a little trick in Dangai, and we can let them be confused in the torrent of time and space. Hearing Aizen plan, Ikamaru Jin heart jumped, but his face did not show any expression, but he showed a habitually smile and praised, "Sure enough, Captain Aizen, so that Soul Society can lose important strength. So, who should go to execute it now? Now is not the time for Espada number 10 to be exposed, and the battle in human world is just to attract Soul Society. Just send some subordinates to go. As for the task of going to the Dangai, leave it to Sailaporo and Eric. What do you think, Eric?" In the end, Aizen turned his eyes to the other side, and sure enough, a handsome figure appeared there at some point. With his hands crossed over his chest and leaning against the wall, Vladimir Eric glanced at Aizen, and the corner of his mouth showed a smile. "I can't ask for more. I have long wanted to meet that Shinigami. I will inform Sailaporo." After saying that, Vladimir Eric's body had disappeared, as if it had never appeared. This guy is really elusive. Looking at the place where Vladimir Eric was originally standing, Ikamaru Jin waved his hand and said helplessly. Most of the time, even he could not accurately detect the appearance and disappearance of Vladimir Eric. It was really powerful to the terrifying strength. "Then I will inform the Arrancar below, Captain Aizen. Go, I will sit here and watch my achievements." Aizen's fingers tapped the armrest of the chair, still a leisurely look, with a confident smile on his face, as if nothing could surprise him. "I don't know how you will deal with this matter, Muyang." Ikamaru Jin walked on the road, thinking about how to deal with Aizen's plan, but there was no result. According to Aizen's plan, this is almost a dead end. The strength of Vladimir, plus the technical research of Sail Apollo, completely cannot think of how to deal with it. As long as he is entangled by Vladimir Eric for a period of time, Sail Apollo can cause a great turmoil in the Dangai, and then the violent detention can take the lives of Muyang and others. After all, until now, no one has heard of anyone who can survive under the threat of detention. His mind is worried about Muyang's situation, but Ikamaru Jin still went to execute Aizen's order without hesitation. Now is not the time for him to be exposed. As for Muyang, he can only ask for his own luck. Soul Society, in front of the gate. You are all ready. Chur Hitsugaya glanced at the people standing in front of him, Kuchiki Rukia, Abarai Renji, Matsumoto Ranjaku, Ikaku, Yumachika, and he himself. This is the member of the Vanguard squad who went to human world to set up camp. Of course, hurry up and go. I have been waiting impatiently. I seem to have smelled the smell of battle. I don't know what kind of guys Arrancar is. I am really looking forward to it. Don't be some guys who can't be cut. Ikaku licked his lips, and his eyes were full of excitement. As long as he thought of the battle that was about to begin, he felt that his blood was boiling. Well, no matter what, I just don't know if those Arrancar are in line with my aesthetic standards. It's really distressing. I don't know what kind of beautiful way to bury them. Bowing and reaching out to pick up his hair, his face had an intoxicated look. Looking at the two 11th Division guys in front of him, Chur Hitsugaya sighed. They were all some troublesome guys. He didn't know what to do after the modern world. Fortunately, Zaraki Kenpachi was still in 4th Division because of the battle with Muyang 2 days ago. He could not participate in this mission, otherwise the situation would be more chaotic. Come to think of it, Kuchiki Captain did not come. Looking at Muyang who was standing there talking to Shur Yukitake, Chur Hitsugaya said thoughtfully. Obviously, he was Muyang's teacher and student, but the relationship between the two was really a little subtle. Presumably, that was the special way of communication of Captain Kuchiki. Speaking of which, can we really not put a restriction seal on them? Muyang looked at Shur Yukitake and asked. No. The vice captain and captain who are going to the modern realm must put a restriction seal on their bodies. This is Soul Society's rule. Kimura, you know that some of the rules cannot be changed. What kind of rule is this? The enemy this time is not something that can be easily dealt with. Even if the team captain is in his peak state, it can't be said that he can completely defeat the other party. Yukitake, you should know how dangerous it is to put a restriction seal on it. This is also something that cannot be helped. I also know that there are many places that Soul Society's rules do not know how to change, but that is not something that can be easily changed. Although there is no way to break the rules, there can still be some changes. This restriction removal request will be passed in the shortest amount of time. Don't worry. It seems that this is the only way. Hearing Sure Yukitake's explanation, Muyang sighed helplessly. By the way, didn't he come to see you off? The problem was solved. Sure Yukitake suddenly looked at Muyang and asked. It's not like I won't come in the future. And isn't he just like this character? Even if he doesn't come, it's not strange. After a soft laugh, Muyang and Sure Yukitake said goodbye and turned to go to Chur Hitsugaya. Now there is no time for them to delay. Although the combat power of human world is completely unafraid of Arrancar sent by Aizen, it is better for Soul Society's reinforcement to arrive quickly. After all, now is not the time for the visor to be completely exposed, let alone Stark and Harabel. Let's go. After greeting Chur Hitsugaya, Muyang took the lead and walked toward the open gate, and Chur Hitsugaya followed closely with several others. The moment he stepped into the gate, Muyang slightly turned his head and glanced at the distance inadvertently. Behind a stone pillar, a figure suddenly turned around. The white feathers on his body floated in the air, and the slightly rolled-up feathers revealed the blue color. Shwa! After a blink of an eye, the figure disappeared from the spot, as if no one had ever appeared. Although he has become a paralyzed cabbage, he still hasn't changed his proud nature. What a cute character. Thinking of the aura he felt before he left, Muyang smiled. What are you thinking about, Mr. Kimura? Seeing the smile on the corner of Muyang's mouth, Chur Hitsugaya strange, he is going to fight with those Arrancar in the modern world. I didn't expect that now Mr. Kimura can still laugh. I don't know what interesting things he thought of. Nothing, just some small things. But then again, how is your recent cultivation, Chur Hitsugaya? Now I am used to the thing you left behind, Mr. Kimura. If it is removed, I think my strength will be greatly improved. Not bad, your Bankai, how is it now? Time can be a lot longer than before, but there is still a distance to completely master. Very good, as long as you persist like this, you can fully master Bankai before the final battle comes. Well. Hearing Muyang's words, Chur Hitsugaya nodded his head heavily. For the last time he had no power to fight back in front of Aizen, he still remembered clearly until now. When the next decisive battle begins, he must kill Aizen with his own hands, the guy who dares to play with Hinamori feelings. Thinking of this, Hitsugaya unconsciously clenched his fists, and there seemed to be a faint layer of cold air. Stop! Suddenly, Muyang stopped and reached out to stop the people behind him. His face revealed a cautious expression as he looked in front of him. What's wrong? Seeing Muyang suddenly stop, although the people behind him all looked puzzled, almost instinctively, they all put their hands on their zanpakuto, and their faces were full of vigilance. Sure enough, there had been a strange feeling since the beginning, and they did not expect it to be this. Come out, I have already found you. There is no need to hide in the dark. Muyang directly pulled out his zanpakuto, holding a knife in one hand to the empty space in front of him, and his expression was very cautious. I was surprised that I was discovered. I thought my skills were very mature. Then, can you tell me how you discovered it, Shinigami? The space in front of him suddenly distorted, and then two figures appeared. Hiss. Seeing the figure in front of him, Muyang suddenly sucked in a cold breath. He had pink hair, golden pupils, and that perverted aura that he exuded. There was no mistake. This guy was the 8th Espada, Sailaporo. Looking at the person in front of him who pushed up his glasses and looked at him with a look of exploration, Muyang's heart unconsciously jumped. Speaking of which, among all the Arrancar, this guy was definitely the person he did not want to meet the most. Although his combat ability was not outstanding, this kind of perverted guy was always the most difficult to deal with. No one knew what strange things he would do. Arrancar. Enemy. Seeing Muyang's fearful look, Hitsugaya pulled out his Zanpakuto without hesitation. He held his knife with both hands and looked at the two people in front of him. The people behind him also pulled out their Zanpakuto at the first time, their faces full of vigilance. Well, the pink-haired guy is called Sailaporo. He is an Arrancar under Aizen, a very tricky guy. He is the same as Captain Kurotsuchi, a scientist. Hearing Muyang's explanation, Hitsugaya and several people behind him all changed their faces. Scientists, especially powerful scientists, are very tricky guys. As long as they think about what Kurotsuchi Mayuri has done, they are full of vigilance to the guy in front of Muyang. Ah, it is really strange. I don't remember that I have fought with someone like you, but you seem to be familiar with me. Sailaporo's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of curiosity in his eyes. As a scientist, nothing could make him more curious than what he didn't know. The other guy is. Hitsugaya looked at the other person standing next to Sailaporo. Compared to Sailaporo, this person gave him a more dangerous feeling. The kind of Ryuryoku that he unconsciously emitted made him feel all the pores in his body stand up. You are. Looking at this guy in front of him, Muyang always felt a strange sense of familiarity. Although he did not have such a face in his memory, the other person's aura made him feel a sense of familiarity. I didn't expect you to forget about me. I was going to settle the debt from 100 years ago with you. Seeing the thoughtful look on Muyang's face, Vladimir Eric showed a trace of distress on his face, as if he was really distressed. You are. Hearing the voice of the person in front of him, a figure hidden in the depths of Muyang's mind suddenly emerged. That aloof figure had the same aloof temperament as the person in front of him, and of course, there was also a powerful strength that was hard to forget. Vladimir Eric. What's wrong? Seeing the sudden change in Muyang's expression, Hitsugaya's face became more serious. This was the first time he saw such an expression on Muyang's face. There was actually someone who could make the powerful Muyang so shocked. Be careful, this guy is very strong. His eyes were fixed on Vladimir Eric. In the face of such a strong enemy, Muyang did not dare to relax in the slightest. It is my honor to be able to get such an evaluation from you. He stood with his hands crossed over his chest and said this, but there was no trace of happiness on Vladimir Eric's face. I won't let you escape again this time, Shinigami. As his voice fell, Vladimir Eric had already appeared in front of Muyang. His Zanpakuto, which was hanging at his waist, had already been unsheathed at some point in time. The purple blade was covered in strange patterns. That strange feeling was perfectly compatible with his temperament. Boom! When the swords and sabers intersected, it caused a strong impact, and the bind on both sides of the dangai suddenly became active. Bang! As Muyang and Vladimir crossed, a violent fluctuation spread from the place where the two fought. So strong! Feeling the fluctuations when the two fought and the flash of Ryuryoku, Hitsugaya's pupils contracted slightly. This was the first time he met an opponent of this level. Is this strength of Arrancar? If Aizen's subordinates are all this level of guys. Shaking off Vladimir, Muyang was just about to explain to Hitsugaya when Vladimir appeared in front of him again, and there was a faint layer of flame burning on the Zanpakuto in his hand. This is. Seeing the flame on the top of Vladimir, Muyang's face changed. Even though he's not releasing his sword, this guy could actually use Zanpakuto to attack with attributes. Bang! The two Zanpakuto crossed, Muyang involuntarily stepped back a few steps, his face slightly changed, he did not expect this guy to be so strong. Seeing that Muyang was actually forced back half a step, Hitsugaya's face changed, and his eyes flashed a trace of horror. For Muyang's strength, he had personally experienced it, and the Arankar could actually force him back. Bankai, Daiguren Hyorinmaru. Hitsugaya waved Zanpakuto in his hand, and before the battle began, he had released his Zanpakuto. Seeing Hitsugaya's actions, the rest of them did not dare to be careless and released their respective Zanpakuto for a moment. Growl, Hiniko. Grow, Hozukumaru. Bloom, Fuji Kujaku. Dance, Sodi no Shirayuki. Bankai, Hai Zabumaru. Oh, it is really a grand welcome ceremony. As expected of Soul Society's captain and vice-captain. There is such a powerful Ryuryoku, but is it really okay to put Zanpakuto in such a level in Dangai? Sailaporo looked at the people in front of him with a smile. Although he was facing so many captain-class warriors by himself, there was no tension on his face. On the contrary, there was a bit of excitement on his face. Presumably, captain-level Shinigami's corpse had a very high research value. Nanny. Hearing the other party's words, the few people on this side became nervous. Previously, because they were facing a battle, they unconsciously ignored the place they were in. This was the broken world, a place that could easily swallow everyone. If they were wrapped in a detention, even Captain had no way. These guys, they deliberately chose this place as a battlefield. Seeing the smile on Sailaporo's face, Zanpakuto in Hitsugaya's hand tightened again. He did not expect that Aizen actually had such an idea. Originally, this method was very difficult to succeed. After all, it was not a simple matter to fight with captain-level people in Dangai. Come out, Ruby. For the time being, stop them for me. Seeing several people on the opposite side unleashing their power, Sailaporo's face showed a satisfied smile. Now it seemed that the plan was going well. The most threatening Muyang was battling against Vladimir Eric. For a while, he could not free himself, and the rest of the people were afraid to fight unscrupulously. As long as Ruby could block them for a while, the plan that Lord Aizen ordered could be perfectly achieved. Hey, are you just going to block them? Sailaporo. I can kill all of them by myself. There is no need to stop them. As a voice fell, a feminine guy appeared from the dark. He looked at the people in front of him with a disdainful smile on his face. His expression was arrogant, as if he could kill them all with a flip of his hand. This guy is also Arankar. He actually has helpers. Seeing Ruby who appeared later, Hitsugaya did not dare to be careless. Although this guy was arrogant, he was not a simple person. He really had the capital to be arrogant. It's up to you, but don't play too much. If you destroy Lord Aizen's plan, I can't save you. When he heard Ruba's words, Sailaporo waved his hand without care. So, these guys are the most annoying. Everyone only knows fighting and killing, who can understand the mystery of science. Dang! Once again fighting against Vladimir Eric, Muyang took a few steps back, his eyes swept the situation on the scene, and his eyes showed a trace of thinking. Aizen actually chose such a place to snipe, and sent such a lineup. Swish! With a tap of his feet, his body instantly appeared next to Vladimir Eric. In his hand, Zanpakuto cut down at lightning speed. Clang! 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 His figure flashed. In an instant, Muyang and Vladimir Eric had already fought over 100 times, but they had not caused any damage to the other party. From the situation of the temporary battle, they were on par. Is Aizen planning to trap me within Dangai? It seems that you have thought of it. A knife cut on Muyang's Zanpakuto. Vladimir Eric saw the flash of understanding in Muyang's eyes and said with a smile. I didn't expect that you, who is arrogant, will use such a little trick. This has nothing to do with strength. This is a strategy. Moreover, I believe that even if this is the case, I will not kill you. I still have a chance to kill you with my own hands. However, even if you can escape, the Shinigami with you will not be able to do so. Let them be the first victims of this battle." Hearing what Vladimir said, Muyang's face suddenly turned cold. Shwa! A layer of blue light suddenly appeared on his Zanpakuto. The speed of Muyang's blade suddenly became faster, and a bright blade light instantly cut through Vladimir Eric's chest. With a stomp of his feet, Vladimir's body abruptly retreated a few steps. He lowered his head to look at the wound on his chest that had been cut open, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. He had actually been injured first. "Bastard, you've angered me." Raising his head and looking at Muyang who was standing not far away, Vladimir Eric's tone became incomparably cold. "Crap, that fellow seems to be angry. Things have become a bit troublesome. Looks like my speed is going to be faster." After sensing the cold aura emitted from Vladimir, Sailaporo's expression changed slightly. He pushed up his glasses and his hands unconsciously moved a bit faster. Shwa! Muyang only felt a shadow flash in front of him. In the next moment, Vladimir Eric appeared in front of him. The Zanpakuto in his hand stabbed towards Muyang's abdomen at a tricky angle. With a slip of his feet, Muyang's body slightly moved to the side. The Zanpakuto in his hand swayed and the tip of the blade accurately stabbed down on Vladimir's Zanpakuto. Ping! Just as Muyang's Zanpakuto stabbed the Zanpakuto of Vladimir, a wisp of purple flame suddenly appeared above the Zanpakuto of Vladimir. An evil fluctuation followed Zanpakuto and transmitted to Muyang. His hands suddenly became cold, and a strange fluctuation came from his Zanpakuto. Muyang's heart instantly trembled, and his thoughts stopped in an instant. So! A piercing sound suddenly came. Muyang suddenly felt a sense of alarm. Without any time to think, he instinctively turned his head, and a cold blade cut through his cheek. Drip! A drop of blood fell from Muyang's cheek, splashing on the ground. Ignoring the blood that slid down his cheek, Muyang looked at Vladimir not far away with a serious expression. He actually had such a strange ability. If his reaction was any slower, his head would be pierced. He swung his saber and threw his Zanpakuto down. Vladimir looked at Muyang with an expressionless face, as if the previous attack had not affected him at all. The one just now, is it a move that can affect one's spirit? I don't know if there is a limit to that kind of move, or if every attack can achieve that kind of effect. Although it can only affect a person's spirit for a short period of time, in a battle, it can decide everything in an instant. If it can be used without limit. However, Muyang tightened his grip, and his Zanpakuto attached a layer of green Ryoryoku. Since I don't know, let me try. If it were for me, this level of interference would not take my life. His feet slipped, and Muyang's figure flashed. Zanpakuto in his hand stabbed at Vladimir, and the high-speed attack tore the air apart, making a sharp sound. Dang! Vladimir's Zanpakuto, which was covered by a layer of purple flames, suddenly appeared and stopped Muyang. Then at that moment, Muyang was in a trance. In just an instant, Muyang recovered. He saw Vladimir in front of him holding Zanpakuto which was pressing him down with one hand and a purple-colored short knife in the other hand. He suddenly stabbed his head. He suddenly released his right hand that was holding his Zanpakuto. Just as Vladimir Eric's body suddenly became unstable because of this, Muyang stretched out his left hand and grabbed his Zanpakuto which was still in the air and slashed. Seeing Muyang's movements, Vladimir Eric's eyes flashed. He raised Zanpakuto in his hand and met Muyang's attack again. Shwa! His Zanpakuto flashed in front of Vladimir Eric. The Ryoryoku, which was wrapped in a knife, instantly burst out and emitted a burst of light, making Vladimir Eric's vision blur. Not good. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Vladimir Eric felt a finger appear in front of his eyes, and a white lightning was gathering on his fingertip. Had number 4, white lightning. Bang! Once again smashed by Kisuk's Zanpakuto, Grimmjow's body is full of blood, although his strength is very strong, but in the absence of liberation, it is still a bit too reluctant to face Kisuk, a guy that even Aizen is extremely afraid of. Bastard! Struggling to parry Kisuk's attack, Grimmjow's face is full of resentment, although he wants to carry out resurrection, but there is still a little scruples in his heart. Dang! Hirako Shinji held Zanpakuto with both hands, and his Zanpakuto, which was fiercely chopped down, was caught by Okuiora with one hand. Although it could be seen from Okuiora's slightly trembling arm that he was also not relaxed, the shock in Hirako Shinji's heart was still difficult to suppress. Although he had broken his holification state, but his strength was not at the level where people could block it with one hand. Very capable, actually blocked my attack with one hand, but are you sure you want to keep fighting with me like this? Looking at the unchanging expression on Okuiora's face, Hirako Shinji restrained his mood and said with a smile. Who knows? The expression on his face did not show any signs of loosening. Okuiora turned his arm and pushed Zanpakuto, who was Hirako Shinji, away. Stepping on the ground, he borrowed strength in the air. Just as Hirako Shinji twisted his body, Zanpakuto in his hand waved at Okuiora again. Seeing Hirako Shinji waving Zanpakuto, Okuiora turned his arm. Almost in an instant, the Zanpakuto in his hand once again faced Hirako Shinji's attack, but the moment the two of them collided, Okuiora's face suddenly changed, and his eyes slightly contracted. This level of power was absolutely different from before. In that instant, Okuiora almost couldn't hold Zanpakuto in his hand, and his body unconsciously took a few steps back, and the arm holding the knife was slightly numb. Shwa! Just as Okuiora retreated because of Hirako Shinji's attack, Hirako Shinji, who was in front of him, disappeared instantly and reappeared behind him. Zanpakuto in his hand stabbed at his back with a cold light. Although Hirako Shinji's action was beyond Okuiora's expectation. However, his probing nerves told him about Hirako Shinji's action in an instant, and the reflex nerves formed in the harsh environment of Hueco Mundo made Okuiora instinctively turn his Zanpakuto behind him to block Hirako Shinji's sharp blade. Boom! Although he had blocked Hirako Shinji's blade, the power from his Zanpakuto still made Okuiora's body fall forward uncontrollably. Damn it! Although the wounds on the outside can be recovered through rapid regeneration, the internal organs are injured because of the attack just now. What a cunning Shinigami! First, he used a lower-level strength to fight me. After I got used to his strength, he suddenly burst out his true strength and caught me off guard. He stretched out his palm to support himself in the air and instantly twisted his body. Okuiora looked warily at Hirako Shinji standing in front of him. This guy was not only powerful, but also had rich combat experience. More importantly, he seemed to be a strategical guy and was difficult to deal with. After stabilizing his body and standing up, Okuiora instantly defined Hirako Shinji. This was a comprehensive guy, whether it was strength, experience, or psychology. It was actually blocked. I thought that the attack just now would work. Hirako Shinji carried Zanpakuto on his shoulder and said with a faint smile on his face. The smile on his face was a little strange. Okuiora looked at Hirako Shinji. His face was calm and did not say a word. He was not a good speaker, let alone a person like Hirako Shinji. It was impossible to arouse his desire to speak. Oh, I originally wanted to get some useful information from you. I didn't expect you to be such a serious guy. It seems that it is impossible to get information from you. But in this case, it is better to get rid of you directly. Seeing Okuiora's expressionless face, Hirako Shinji patted his head and said helplessly. As soon as he finished speaking, Hirako Shinji's figure disappeared from where he was. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Okuiora. He squatted down and picked up Zanpakuto in his hand. His footsteps slipped and his body moved backward, avoiding Hirako Shinji's attack. However, the tip of Zanpakuto blade still cut through Okuiora's chest and cut his clothes. Not only strength, but also speed can be faster. Then, Does it mean that his Ryuryoku can also become stronger and react faster? Looking at Zanpakuto passing by in front of his eyes, Okuiora calmly analyzed the information of Hirako Shinji. Although the battle was not in their original plan, since the battle had begun, he had to gather the information of the enemy as much as possible. What a terrifying combat instinct! As expected of someone who has gone through so many hardships in the Hueco Mundo and finally grew to this extent. Even if I caught him off guard because of my previous hidden strength, can't I still increase the results of the battle? What a terrifying guy! Hirako Shinji saw that he had quickly retreated and left his attack range. The expression on his face became a bit serious. Hiss. Just as the two were confronting each other, the clothes on Okuiora's chest suddenly cracked. It was caused by Hirako Shinji's attack before. Although it did not hurt Okuiora, it still cut his clothes. That is. Seeing the large number 4 on Okuiora's broken chest, Hirako Shinji's eyes flashed a trace of thinking. Did that number have a special meaning? Boom! Just as Hirako Shinji was thinking about the special meaning of this number, a figure suddenly flew from the side and smashed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Damn it, I'm going to kill you, you wooden clog. A sorry figure stood up in the dust. His face was full of hatred as he looked at Kisuke, who was not far away. Looking at the wounds on his body, he knew that he had been abused by Kisuke a lot in the battle just now. This is. Seeing the number 6 on the back of Grimjow's waist, Hirako Shinji thought of something and turned his eyes to the big guy who was fighting with Yoruchi. His eyes showed a trace of exploration. Hirako Shinji noticed the 6 on the back of Grimjow. Kisuke also noticed the number 4 on Okuiora chest. There was a number engraved on the 2 Arancars. They had reason to believe that this number had a special meaning. Moreover, these 2 numbers were obviously written in the same font. Yoruchi. Looking at the numbers on the 2 people, Kisuke immediately shouted. What's wrong? Hearing Kisuke's cry, Yoruchi figure moved out of the battle circle and turned to look at them. To deal with Yami, this big guy, Yoruchi did not need to devote herself to it. For her, this kind of strong and low agility opponent was the easiest to deal with. Just as she turned around, Yoruchi immediately noticed the number on Okuiora's chest, and glanced at the number on Grimjow's waist. She immediately understood Kisuke's idea. Waving to Kisuke, Yoruchi turned to Yami. The other side had not attacked yet, and it was obvious that Yoruchi's speed made him a little unable to react. Shunko! Yoruchi shouted, and a strong aura suddenly burst out from her body, attracting the eyes of Yami, who was facing her back. TSK, finally stop running, you damn bug. Yami shouted, and his body jumped high and smashed down on Yoruchi. His huge body gave a great visual impact. It's useless. Looking at the overconfident Yami who was pouncing towards him, Yoruchi had a trace of disdain on her face. Although it was also instantaneous, the power she used this time was stronger than before. With a whoosh, Yoruchi's body disappeared from the original place, leaving only the ground cracked by her footsteps. In the next moment, Yoruchi's body appeared on the top of Yami's head, and the dense almost solid Ryuryoku wrapped her fist and punched at the ignorant Yami's head. Bang! The moment Yoruchi swung her fist down, the sound of air being torn apart rang out. At the same time, a visible ripple spread out from the place where Yoruchi had swung her fist. Boom! Yoruichi's fist tore through the air in an instant, bringing with it a terrifying momentum as it smashed onto Yami. There was no resistance at all. The moment Yoruichi's fist smashed into his body, Yami was fiercely smashed from the sky to the ground. The entire ground suddenly shook violently, leaving behind a huge crater. Cough! Cough! Yami slowly got up from the ground and coughed out a large mouthful of blood. His face was extremely ugly. His entire body was filled with great anger. Ryuryoku also became unstable. A strong sense of oppression faintly emerged, causing the expressions of Kisuke and Shinji, who were originally watching the show, to change slightly. However, compared to that aura, the number on his body. After the attack from Yoruchi just now, even with Yami's rough skin and thick flesh, there was still a huge wound on his body, not to mention the clothes on his body. Seeing the number 10 engraved on the top of Yami's body, Kisuke and the other two looked thoughtful. The three of them had such numbers on their bodies. This was definitely not something that could be said by coincidence. "Bastard, I will kill you." The furious Yami suddenly pulled out Zanpakuto from his waist, and a strong aura faintly emerged. Damn, if that guy released his resurrection now, it will affect Lord Aizen's plan. Seeing Yami's action, Okiura secretly cried in his heart. This guy's body seems to have grown a bit bigger. Yoruchi stood in the distance, looking at Yami with some vigilance. Although from the previous battle, this guy's strength was a bit different from the other two guys, and if their numbers really had a special meaning, his ranking was indeed below the other two. But why did he feel uneasy looking at this guy? Not only did his body become bigger, but even Ryoryoku had a great change. What was going on with this guy? "Bastard! I'll kill you, I'll kill all of you." At this time, Yami was already furious, and red Ryoryoku, visible to the naked eye, rose from his body, making his body seem as if it was inflated. "Wait, Yami. You can't be released in this place." Seeing Yami's action, Okiura's face changed. This place was close to the center of the Karakura town. If Yami was released in this place, Ryoryoku at the level of Espada number 10 would definitely have a great impact on the Karakura city. If there was an unpredictable change in the environment of the Karakura city because of the battle of himself and others, which led to the impact of Lord Aizen's final plan. TSK, actually forced to such an extent by a few Shinigami. Sure enough, although reluctantly entered the ranks of Espada number 10, it is only this level in the end. Just as Yami was about to release Zanpakuto, an old voice suddenly came. "Nani?" Hearing this voice, Kisuke and the other two suddenly looked shocked. When did this guy appear? He did not even notice it before. What kind of guy came this time? Baragon. Looking at the new figure, Okiura took a breath and his tone changed slightly. He did not expect that Lord Aizen actually sent him, this guy who did not respect Lord Aizen. Feeling the huge pressure from Baragon, Yami, who was going to be liberated, also stopped his movements. "Do you want to use your resurrection, Yami?" Baragon narrowed his eyes and looked at Yami. For many years, the aura of the king of Hueco Mundo gave people an invisible pressure. It was not the suppression of Ryoryoku, but the suppression of invisible aura. If you liberate your sword here, your powerful Ryoryoku will make those fragile humans unable to stand it. If your rashness causes the failure of boss plan later, I will be very distressed. TSK. He looked at Baragon. In the end, Yami withdrew his Zanpakuto back to his waist. It wasn't that he didn't know what the consequences would be if he rashly released Zanpakuto. It was only because he had been suppressed by Yoruchi that his eyes turned red. Now that he had calmed down a little, he no longer wanted to release Zanpakuto. "It seems that you have temporarily calmed down." Seeing Yami, who still sheathed his sword with a bit of unwillingness on his face, Baragon's face showed a bit of satisfaction. Just as Baragon turned his eyes back, the two Arankar standing behind him took out a bag and poured out a lot of white bones from it. Then, under the gaze of several people, the white bones quickly formed a white bone throne. Dong! Baragon sat on the white bone throne, his back leaning against the back of the chair, and one hand knocking on the chair. His eyes swept slightly over Okiura and Grimmjow on the other side. "Since I am here, I will take over the battlefield. You three are not allowed to have any objections." The other three did not say anything. Even with Grimmjow's arrogance, he only curled his lips in dissatisfaction and did not stand up to refute Baragon. As for Okiura, he did not care about such things. "Although it seems that you are at a disadvantage, I think that as Espada, you do not need any support," so I will not interfere in your battle. However, that half-disabled kid over there is the boss goal this time, right? Since I am here, just kill him, and the other 2 human brats who are hidden. What? Hearing Baragon's words, Ulquiorra and the other 3 did not react. After all, even if they did not have the advantage in the previous battle, as Espada, they still had their own dignity and would not allow the subordinates to interfere in their battle. Therefore, Baragon's plan was taken into consideration. However, on the other side, Kisuk and the others were shocked. Although they had the upper hand when facing their respective opponents, it was definitely not an overwhelming advantage. Now, there was an unknown enemy. Moreover, this enemy had brought several enemies with him. If they only attacked the 3 of them, although it would be a little troublesome. But even so, before that, there was one thing that he had to figure out first. It was about what he had heard before. Schwa. In a flash, Kisuk disappeared in front of Grimjow. For some reason, Grimjow did not stop Kisuk, just stood there and watched. Well, don't you introduce yourself before the battle? Kisuk held Zanpakuto in one hand and pressed his hat with the other hand. Although he looked a little leisurely, at this moment, he was in a highly concentrated state. After all, this guy in front of him did not look like a simple person. For example, what place are you in? Looking at Baragon in front of him, a shrewd look flashed through Kisuk's eyes hidden under his hat. How dare you talk to Lord Baragon like this? Seeing Kisuk suddenly appear in front of him, Baragon had not yet spoken, but Gio Vega who was standing behind him had already jumped out, pointing at Kisuk and shouting loudly. Retreat, Gio. Waving his hand to interrupt the words of his subordinates, Baragon looked straight at the guy in front of him. It was this guy, who was called by Aizen as the only guy who could be compared with him in terms of IQ, the guy who created Jayaku. I am Baragon Luzenbarn, one of the Espada. Espada is it, as expected. Hearing Baragon's answer, Kisuk's mouth showed a trace of a bitter smile. Let the gossip end here. Baragon crossed his arms, leaned back, and ordered several subordinate officers beside him, Bo, you go and deal with the next Shinigami agent. Gio, you go to the 2 human children mentioned before in the future. Not good. Hearing Baragon's order, Kisuk was shocked in his heart, but before his body could do anything, Grimjow had already appeared beside him and slashed down at him. Dang! Turning around to block Grimjow's attack, Kisuk borrowed the power of Grimjow to quickly dodge. The newcomer was the so-called Espada. Obviously, he was stronger than the previous 3 fellows. It was not a wise decision to fight in front of him. However, Ichigo and the 3 others were in danger. Kisuk was not the only one who thought of this. When she saw the petite figure and handsome face rushing towards the hiding place of Oriheim and the others, Yoroiki's expression suddenly changed. He moved to stop them. Schwa. Yoroiki's vision blurred and she had already lost the face. The next moment, the face appeared next to her and kicked her body. Turning her body, she struggled to avoid the attack. Yoroiki's eyes were full of seriousness. That guy's speed was extraordinary. Oh. Is this the so-called god of flash Yoruchi Shihuin? You're pretty slow. Gio Vega said as he glanced at Yoruchi, who was barely able to dodge his attack. The so-called fastest god of flash was just as so. Even without using his full strength, he could still keep up with her speed. Damn it, was it affected by the injuries from before? And this effect is still going on. The battle below is getting harder and harder to fight. Boom! Just as Yoruchi was thinking, Yami had already come to her side, and the fist in her hand was fiercely swung down. The fist missed. Yami was not in a hurry to catch up with Yoruchi, but looked at Yoshio with a brutal face, and the killing intent in her eyes was boiling. You bastard! How dare you steal my prey? Hearing Yami's words, Gio's face changed. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly remembered something, and his face changed. Finally, He turned around and went to find the traces of the two humans before him without saying a word. Damn it! Kurosaki Ichigo's expression changed drastically when he saw Gio, who was rushing to find Orihime and Sato on the well and was ready to kill them. Although his current physical condition was definitely not good and it was difficult for him to even stand, even if he had to die, he absolutely could not tolerate the enemy chasing after his companions in front of him. Relying on the will to protect in his heart, Kurosaki Ichigo grabbed Zanpakuto with both hands and propped him on the ground. He struggled to stand up and wanted to go forward to stop the void. Who? All of a sudden, Kurosaki Ichigo felt the sky above his head darken. A strong gust of wind came from above his head, accompanied by a strong pressure. Bang! The huge Reincarnation Pow had appeared beside the absent-minded Kurosaki Ichigo at some time. The huge palm raised and slapped down on Kurosaki Ichigo's head, smashing him into the ground. Ichigo! Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo was knocked down by a palm, Hirako Shinji's expression changed and he shouted in surprise. You shouldn't worry about other people's free time now, right? Okiura stabbed with an expressionless knife, blocking Hirako Shinji who was going to rush to Kurosaki Ichigo. These are the two humans, right? They are indeed very weak. They are completely like trash. Just as Ichigo was knocked down by a single palm, and the few of them were worried about him, the voice of Reincarnation Gio suddenly rang clearly in their ears. Turning their heads to look in the direction of the voice, they saw Orihime and Chad, who were being held in one hand by Gio. The expressions of Kisuke and the others immediately became extremely ugly. Orihime. Chad. Seeing Orihime and Chad Yasutora caught in his hands, Kurosaki Ichigo, who was slapped to the ground, changed his face greatly. He struggled to stand up, but his body, which had been riddled with holes, did not allow him to do this at all. Seeing the expression on Kurosaki Ichigo's face, half kneeling on the ground, Gio's face showed a cruel smile. Do you want to save these two people? It's a pity, now it's too late, the two of them are dead. Grinning at Kurosaki Ichigo, Gio's heart was full of a strange sense of excitement. Sure enough, humans were really a fragile creature. As long as he used a little strength on his hand, these two humans would die under his hands. Even the human youth who was lucky enough to get Shinigami's strength, although he was the guy Aizen specifically told, in the end, it was only that level. Don't. Seeing the expression on Gio's face, Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to have thought of something. His pupils suddenly contracted. Suddenly, Kurosaki Ichigo felt that the whole world seemed to have stopped moving. All the voices and images disappeared from him, and the surroundings became a dark and vast scenery. At the same time, a familiar voice sounded in his mind. Ha! You are indeed a waste. Even your own companions can't protect you. A weak fellow like you is not qualified to control your body at all. Give me your body. Yes, I am just a waste. I am just a poor and weak fellow. I can't even protect my own companions. So you know it yourself. Then, give your body to me. These bastards don't even use their full strength. I can deal with them easily. I'm sorry. Everyone, in the end, I still didn't do anything. I wasn't able to protect you. After saying this in a low voice, Kurosaki Ichigo's consciousness gradually relaxed. His body also slowly relaxed. At this time, even if he could only become a hollow in the end, he would definitely save everyone. Ha! It's out. I'm finally out. With a sinister cry, an evil mask appeared on Kurosaki Ichigo's face. At the same time, an evil and powerful Ryuryoku, who was even more evil than Reincarnation, burst out from Kurosaki Ichigo's body without restraint. What? Feeling the sudden outburst from the human youth in front of him, Pao's face showed a rare trace of surprise. This human youth was clearly very weak before, and he was knocked unconscious with a casual palm. Why could such a weak guy burst out with such a Ryuryoku? Before Pao had the time to think about this, he felt a knife flash in front of his eyes, and then a sharp pain came from his body. How is this possible? He was killed by such a guy. With this thought in his mind, Pao's body fell down weakly. In just an instant, the situation on the battlefield changed greatly. The originally precarious Kurosaki Ichigo suddenly erupted with a force that made everyone look sideways at Ryuryoku, and also killed the big man in an instant. What's going on? That little brat? Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo's actions, Gio's expression changed slightly. What was going on with the Ryuryoku on that little brat? It made his body unconsciously tremble. Was this kind of Ryuryoku really something that a little brat could have? After cutting down the Aaron beside him, the hollowified Kurosaki Ichigo turned his gaze to the other side. His pair of yellow pupils with no emotion at all looked at the distant Gio who was holding up Orihime and Chad Yasutora, as if he was looking at a dead person. Being stared at by Kurosaki Ichigo, Gio only felt a sense of fear in his heart. Although there was no heart, at that moment, Gio really felt the emotion in his heart called fear. However, even that kind of emotion only lasted for an instant. In the next moment, he only felt his vision blur. A bone-piercing pain came from his chest. The hands that were originally holding the two humans unconsciously loosened. At the same time, his body powerlessly fell down. It can't be. It's actually so fast that I didn't even have time to react. Before losing consciousness, there was only one thought in Gio's mind. There was also that pair of emotionless eyes that he could never forget in his mind. Aha aha ergar. After cutting down another Aaronkar, Kurosaki Ichigo raised Zanpakuto high and let out a cry of unknown meaning, and his tone was full of joy. Ichigo. Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo's state, Hirako Shinji's face became very ugly. As someone who had experienced all this before, he certainly knew better than everyone what this was, and what Kurosaki Ichigo was about to face in this state. Oh. Is this Shinigami's hollowification? Interesting. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo had cut down two of his subordinates, there was no anger on Baragon's face. Instead, he looked at Kurosaki Ichigo with interest, and his tone was full of curiosity. In that case, let me play with you for the time being. Don't disappoint me, little brat. As he spoke, Baragon stood up and looked at Kurosaki Ichigo who was not far away. Oh, 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 oh. As if sensing Baragon's line of sight and provocation, Ichigo's hollow mask once again issued a meaningful cry. As his cry fell, a layer of keratin gradually appeared around his body, and the whole person's breath became more violent. Oh. You look more and more like a hollow. What an interesting kid. I am more and more interested in you. A few minutes ago, in Siriidii, the 12th Division Technology Development Bureau. Not good. A few more powerful. Ryuryoku reactions have appeared in the modern realm. What's wrong? Kuratsuchi Mayuri quickly walked over and asked as he heard the voice of the team member in charge of monitoring. Yes. Captain Kuratsuchi, several powerful Ryuryoku reactions appeared in the place where Aaronkar appeared before the modern realm. From Ryuryoku's point of view, they were all in the form of Aaronkar, and one of them was above the 3 Aaronkar before. 3 Aaronkar? I remember there were only 2. Yes. Captain, it was 2 in the beginning, but then there was another one, but now. Trash, you can't even explain clearly. Get out of the way. Walking to the monitor screen, he rudely pushed away the team members who were sitting there before. Kuratsuchi Mayuri typed on the keyboard with his hands and analyzed the information about the few Aaronkar Ryuryoku. This is. Seeing the result of his own analysis, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's eyes obviously showed a trace of shock. What's wrong, Captain? Seeing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's reaction, Akon, who was standing on the side, asked curiously. Since he entered the Technology Development Bureau, he rarely saw such an expression on Kuratsuchi Mayuri's face. The last time he saw this kind of expression, he could not remember how many years ago it was. This is Ryuryoku who is stronger than Captain. I didn't expect that there is such a level of Arankar under Aizen. This is really. Saying that, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's body trembled uncontrollably, his eyes stared at the boss, and the expression on his face became extremely abnormal. Captain, he. Standing beside Kuratsuchi Mayuri, Akon was naturally the first to find Kuratsuchi Mayuri's abnormality, but he knew that his abnormal captain would never be afraid of such a thing, so his reaction could only be. This is so exciting. I really want to dissect him and study him. Kuratsuchi Mayuri's fingers danced uncontrollably, and his face was full of excitement. Sure enough, I knew it would be like this. Seeing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's reaction, Akon secretly sighed in his heart. Hey, the guy over there, why aren't you turning on the monitor? I remember that I asked you to install a monitor in the Karakura city. Yes. Captain, but for some reason, it is completely unable to connect with the monitor in the modern world. Hearing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's cry, a team member on the side raised his hand weakly and said with a tone full of fear. TSK. Strangely, after hearing this team member's answer, Kuratsuchi Mayuri seemed to think of something and rarely did not get angry with this team member. He just curled his lips unhappily. Forget it if you can't see it, but I remember that Chur Hitsugaya should have entered the realm gate at this time. Why haven't they come to the real world yet? Really, those guys have no sense of time at all. Connect me to the scene of the Dangai, I want to talk to them, although Muyang is an unpleasant guy, but if it is him, maybe he can help me catch a few Arankar, especially the guy who is stronger than the Captain Ryuryoku. Thinking that he could dissect the Arankar that were stronger than the Captain Ryuryoku, Kuratsuchi Mayuri felt an indescribable sense of excitement, his hands danced uncontrollably, apparently unable to control his own body. No, not good, Captain Kuratsuchi, we can't contact the captain of Chur Hitsugaya and others in the Dangai. The team member in charge of the side quickly waved his hands on the keyboard, trying to contact Chur Hitsugaya and others, but there was no reply. His face suddenly became pale, and sweat kept sliding down his face. It was not because he was worried about Chur Hitsugaya and others who could not be contacted, but because he was worried about his own life. What? What did you say? Hearing the answer of the team member, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's excitement on his face suddenly disappeared, and he looked at the team member over there with a dangerous expression. Sorry, Captain, but we really can't contact Captain Hitsugaya and others. Not only that, we can't see the situation in the Dangai at all. The signal is all cut off by an unknown force. Seeing the expression on Kuratsuchi Mayuri's face, the team member spoke with a hint of crying, apparently afraid of Kuratsuchi Mayuri's appearance. Humph. Get out of my way, what a bunch of trash. Hearing the team member's words, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's eyes flashed a trace of thinking, the expression on his face was slightly restrained, strode over to the other side and pushed the team member away. Kuratsuchi Mayuri's fingers quickly danced on the keyboard, investigating the information about Dangai. From the previous team member's words, he had noticed a trace of disharmony. First, a large number of Arankar suddenly appeared. It was a little strange to invade human world at this time. Aizen would not choose to start the decisive battle now. According to his inference, it will take another 3 months before the Hjayaku that Aizen got can be fully awakened. Moreover, suddenly lost contact with Dangai. It doesn't look like a coincidence. So it is like this. Seeing the data presented on the screen in front of him, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's eyes flashed a trace of understanding, and then a strong anger appeared in his eyes. Bastard, you dare to do such a thing under my eyes. Turning his head to look at Akon who was standing next to him, Kuratsuchi Mayuri waved his hand and ordered them, Akon, now lead a group of people to analyze the data of the Dangai for me. You must restore the connection with the Dangai in the shortest time possible. I know. Akon's face was also a bit serious. He had just seen what was on the screen in front of Kuratsuchi Mayuri. Naturally, he had some understanding of the situation in the Dangai. If they did not make any countermeasures in the Dangai, Hitsugaya and others will definitely be swallowed by the space-time turbulence in the Dangai. After instructing the players below, Kuratsuchi Mayuri stood up and looked at the busy players around him. He crossed his arms, his fingers constantly tapping on his arms, showing his inner restlessness. After all, in the war they are about to face with Aizen, if they lose the combat effectiveness of those people in Dangai, Seoul society's situation is really dangerous. Dangai. After Muyang once again blocked Vladimir Luo's attack, a trace of impatience appeared on his face. Although the other party did not gain any advantage in the previous battle, he also did not gain anything either. The most important thing was that he was completely pinned down by this guy. He did not have the time to pay attention to Sail Apollo over there at all. Who knew what that guy was busy with right now? In short, it gave people a feeling of unease. This can't go on like this. Muyang was secretly anxious, but he did not dare to let go of his hand to fight. Otherwise, who knew if there would be some unknown changes because of their Ryuryoku? That thing was not something that Ryuryoku could deal with alone. Moreover, now the restraint had become very unstable. All right. At this moment, Sail Apollo, who had been standing on the side all this time, suddenly raised his head and pushed his eyes. A smile appeared on his face, but that strange smile was particularly horrifying in the eyes of the people here. Hearing Salayama's words, Muyang's heart inexplicably tightened. He took a few steps back and stood together with Hitsugaya and others who also withdrew their hands, maintaining a vigilant position to look at the people opposite him. Hoo-hoo. Hitsugaya and others gasped for breath. Because of the narrow environment in the Dangai, they were very tired in the previous battle, especially Hitsugaya. As the captain, he naturally had to take most of the responsibility, but in the case of being limited by 80% of his strength, he was fighting bitterly. What kind of plot are they planning? We will know soon. Muyang narrowed his eyes and looked at Sail Apollo not far away. He felt uneasy. I was just thinking about how we should leave the battlefield. I didn't expect you to cooperate so well. Looking at Muyang, the corners of Salayama's mouth curved up. Then a black cavity suddenly appeared and wrapped the three of them. Enjoy it. I specially prepared this for you. Shwa. Muyang cut through the air with his saber. The three masked figures disappeared in an instant. In terms of mastery of Garganta technology, no one could surpass Sail Apollo. The Garganta he opened was naturally very different from the others. Even with Muyang's speed, he could not stop him. What did he do? Muyang narrowed his eyes as he pondered. He did not believe that Sail Apollo and the others were here to fight with them. Moreover, Sail Apollo had been preparing something. What's wrong? Hitsugaya sheathed his Zanpakuto and walked to Muyang's side and asked. I don't know, but I feel a little uneasy. Rumble. Just as Muyang finished speaking, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the distance, and then a bright light shone on them. How is this possible? This time, the Tatsu would not appear. Seeing the Tatsu appearing behind them, Hitsugaya screamed. When they entered the Dangai, it was impossible for the Tatsu to appear. Run! They did not have time to think about why the sudden appearance of Tatsu. They immediately began to run in the direction of the modern realm. Even the captain could not deal with something like Tatsu. What's going on? After running 2 steps, they stopped and looked in front of them in disbelief. The Tatsu actually started to surge uncontrollably. It was not like how it used to chase them by their side or behind. Instead, it squirmed in front of them and blocked their path. This situation. After checking the situation they were facing, everyone's face became extremely ugly, and the Tatsu behind them was slowly approaching, but the road ahead was blocked by the Tatsu, which was a dilemma. I will clean up the things in front. Renji stood up and held his Zanpakuto. Now was not the time to worry. If it was his baboon cannon, it should be able to win time for everyone. Don't be stupid, let me do it. While speaking, the surrounding environment had become even worse. He didn't know what Sail Apollo had done. Now the Dangai was beyond recognition. The road in front of them had been completely covered by the Kotatsu, and the prison behind them was rushing over at a high speed. Bankai, broken wind blade. Muyang shook his hand and instantly released his Zanpakuto. Then a dazzling silver light appeared on the blade. Muyang turned his arm, and Zanpakuto slashed forward. As the silver blade shot out, the Kotatsu in front of him was suddenly cut open. So powerful. Looking at the path in front of them that was slashed by Muyang, Rukia muttered. That is. Chur-Hitsugaya's eyes looked at a light in the distance. Although it seemed to be just a crack, he still keenly felt several powerful Ryoryoku from there, and several of them gave him a familiar feeling. It seems that there is a war in human world now. You should go and support it quickly. Feeling the collision of Ryoryoku, Muyang's face changed and he ordered them. He did not expect that there was a war now. This was completely different from what he remembered. And from the collision of Ryoryoku, it was not a simple thing. What was Aizen thinking? I know. Hearing Muyang's words, Chur-Hitsugaya directly ran forward with several people. Now is not the time to hesitate. Moreover, although the Tatsu is not something that Shinigami can deal with, if it is Muyang, maybe he has a way. The detention flow outside is like a different world from ours. Although it is still surging, it can't touch us and is blocked outside. Chur-Hitsugaya glanced at the silver light on both sides, and a trace of thought flashed in his eyes. It is this force that blocked the surge of the detention flow, and directly opened a passage in the Dangai to connect to the modern world. Is this Kimura's strength? So strong. Muyang turned around and looked at the rapidly approaching distance. The distance between him and himself was getting shorter and shorter. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. A bright silver light flashed on his Zanpakuto. Dong! Just as Muyang was about to take action, a strange fluctuation suddenly appeared from his side, instantly affecting his body. And just as Muyang's body was swept by that invisible sound wave, his body suddenly fell into a stiff state. Damn it! I fell into a trap. The instant his body was swept by that fluctuation, Muyang had already reacted. However, it was still too late. Although it was only an instant, with the speed of Bind, he had already arrived in front of Muyang in an instant. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he rolled over Muyang's body. Accompanied by a dazzling light, Muyang's body disappeared into the Dangai. How could it be? Just as he was about to leave the Dangai, Toshiro subconsciously looked back. Then, he saw that Muyang's body suddenly stopped and was swallowed up by the vines without any resistance. With his strength, he was actually swallowed by the bind. Chur-Hitsugaya's heart was full of shock, and just as his heart was shocked, an attack suddenly shot toward his body. Be careful, Captain. An instant step appeared beside Chur-Hitsugaya, waving his knife to block the attack from who knows where. Matsumoto Ranjaku held the knife with both hands and looked around vigilantly. I was careless. After putting away the shock in his heart, Toshiro Hitsugaya turned his head and held Zanpakuto with both hands, a serious expression on his face. Although the matter of Muyang being caught and devoured was very serious, now was not the time to think about this. The path that Muyang had just created just now had allowed them to appear on the battlefield. Now, they were surrounded by enemies. If they were not focused, they would die. Regarding Muyang, it was better to wait until the battle was over before talking to Kisuke. Now, even if he told them, it would not improve. Instead, it would affect their battle will. Moreover, if it was Muyang, even if he was caught and devoured, he would definitely be fine. While comforting himself in his heart, Chur-Hitsugaya looked at the battlefield not far away in front of him. Is this inside? Muyang floated in an unknown substance. His eyes looked at everything around him with a little curiosity. Around his body, there was a layer of bright silver light, isolating him from everything around him. But compared to this, what did Sail Apollo do? Thinking of what happened to him before, a haze suddenly rose in Muyang's heart. This was the first time he encountered something beyond his understanding. Although he was also disturbed by Aizen's Kaika Suigetsu because of his carelessness, he had already predicted that, so it was also within his acceptable range. But this time, the first time he felt helpless. Not only was the development of the matter different from the plot in his memory, but more importantly, it was the unknown reason that Sail Apollo could interfere with his Ryuryoku and his movements in an instant. Although the time was short, in a battle of their level, a lot of things could be decided in an instant. Should I say that as expected of Espada, there is actually this kind of black technology. Knowledge is indeed power. After thinking for a long time, there was still no thought in his mind. Muyang could only helplessly shake his head and attributed all of this to black technology. However, compared to that unclear black technology, I should think about how to get out of here first. Although I can temporarily isolate myself from the outside world with the help of Zanpakuto's power, it is not a solution to keep going like this. Not to mention the development of the outside world, even my ability is not enough to keep going like this. Looking at the silver light that was getting thinner and thinner on the outside of his body, a hint of worry appeared in Muyang's eyes. This place was filled with chaotic streams of space and time. It was very difficult to feel the signals of the spatial node he had left in the outside world here, let alone use Zanpakuto's ability to break through space and get out. This time, it was really troublesome. He had never heard of any descriptions about the inside of the prison. It seemed that no one had ever gone out from it. What a misfortune. He said this without any meaning in his words. Muyang sat cross-legged in the void and placed Zanpakuto on his lap. He slowly closed his eyes and continuously emitted bright silver light from Zanpakuto. It wrapped around his body and isolated him from the surroundings. It was still the same familiar world, green trees, red flowers, and that handsome figure. The folding fan in his hand swayed gently, and his silver hair danced gently. Not only his hair, but even his clothes all turned silver. Even his pupils were no exception, turning silver. Skywind's entire body exuded a mysterious temperament, giving people an invisible sense of oppression. Oh. You actually came here in the state of Bankai. It's really rare. Don't you hate it? Turning around and looking at Muyang, Skywind's tone was a bit of a smile, but there was no expression on his face, even more indifferent than white. Ah, I really hate to come in this state. Just facing a motionless world without any sound is already very uncomfortable, not to mention facing a paralyzed face like you. Muyang looked around. The world that was originally filled with violent winds and lightning had actually fallen into an absolute silence at this time. Other than the voices of Muyang and Skywind, nothing could be heard. But you also know that in this situation, only by relying on this move can you be saved. Of course I know. Although I don't want to admit it, I can only place my hopes on this now. I already said that you would definitely use this move. After all, this is different from your previous moves. If you had accepted it earlier, you wouldn't have been at your wits' end. You are really long-winded. Even now is not too late. Let's begin. The 12th Division. The wave that blocked the signal has disappeared. Is it because he sensed our movements, or is it because he has achieved his goal? Kuratsuchi Mayuri, who was typing on the keyboard, felt that the communication link between him and Chur Hitsugaya had returned to normal. He immediately stopped his movements and thought in his mind. Captain, Chur Hitsugaya has successfully arrived in the modern world and has joined the war. Now he is fighting with the few Arankars in the modern world. The unfavorable trend of the war has been alleviated, but... But what? Kuratsuchi Mayuri asked with an impatient expression on his face when he heard the words of his subordinates. In this situation, they were still hesitating. Really, it seemed that they must have been relaxed. But Mr. Kimura's Ryuryoku did not appear in the modern world, but disappeared in the Dangai. What? Hearing the report of the team, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's expression suddenly changed. That guy's Ryuryoku had disappeared. He suddenly sat up straight, his hands quickly tapping on the keyboard, searching for traces of Ryuryoku in the Dangai, trying to find the answer to Muyang and Ryuryoku's disappearance from those traces left behind. This is... Looking at the data displayed on the screen, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's expression became more serious. It's actually Tatsu. Akon, who was standing beside Kuratsuchi Mayuri, looked at the data on the screen and took a deep breath. That was Tatsu, the scavenger of the Dangai. It was something that could destroy everything on it. Until now, no one had survived from that. It was something that Shinigami could not deal with. Nimue, take the instrument and go to the Dangai with me to check it out. I know. Hearing Kuratsuchi Mayuri's words, Kuratsuchi Nimue, who had been standing on the side, answered expressionlessly. Then she went to the side to get the instrument and followed Kuratsuchi Mayuri out. Is this Aizen's conspiracy again? From the beginning, his goal was Muyang. All his actions were just to use Tatsu to trap Muyang. But even if he trapped Muyang now, what can he do? There are still a few months before the complete awakening of Jayaku. This is definitely beyond doubt after his own precision calculation. Aizen can't start a decisive battle now. Or does Aizen think that he can completely defeat Muyang like this? Although Tatsu is really not something that Shinigami can deal with, if it is Muyang, this kind of journey is absolutely not enough to kill him. As he strode forward, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's eyes kept rolling, and all kinds of thoughts rolled in his heart. Although he was thinking of all kinds of things in his heart, Kuratsuchi Mayuri's pace did not slow down at all. Instead, it became faster and faster. He could not wait to see what method Aizen used to let Muyang be caught and swallowed. After all, under normal circumstances, Muyang would never be touched by that kind of thing. In the 12th division, Akon looked at the picture on the screen in front of him and felt slightly bad in his heart. After all, in the current battlefield of human world, Soul Society did not have an absolute advantage. Moreover, this kind of battle in human world was also a big burden for the Technical Development Bureau. After all, it was not a simple matter to isolate those powerful and terrible Ryuryoku. If one was not careful, even if it were foreignly affected by those Ryuryoku, it would cause a large number of human deaths. The situation is really grim. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Just as Tushira Hitsugaya steadied himself, a few figures appeared in front of them. Their Ryuryoku caused Tushira Hitsugaya and the others to slightly change their expressions. None of these people were weak. Even if they were not comparable to the captain, they were not much worse. Matsumoto Ranjaku stretched out her hand and pressed her headphones on her ear, waiting for the signal from the other side. Although she had already sent a restriction to Soul Society when she first came out and saw the situation they were facing, and the other side also stated that they would remove it as soon as possible, the current situation was too dangerous. Ha! Are these opponents? Seeing the broken faces on the other side, Ikiku said with a little excitement. From the look of Ryuryoku on the other side, none of them were weak. It seemed that he could fight happily. As long as he thought of a fierce battle, Ikiku felt his blood boil. There is really no way. Let me give you a beautiful way to die. Bowing and reaching out to stroke his hair, his posture was elegant. Even at this time, he would not forget to maintain his demeanor. That is it, Ichigo. Rukia looked at the figure not far away and said with uncertainty in her tone. Whether it is the clothes or the Zanpakuto in his hand, that person is Ichigo, but what is the ominous Ryuryoku from his body, and the mask on his face, it is simply hollow. Although I don't know what happened to Ichigo, but now is not the time to be stunned. Rukia. The enemy is in front of us. Glancing at the direction of Ichigo, Renji took back his eyes, holding the knife in his hands and looking at the several Erincar in front of him. Although his heart was also very worried about the situation over there, He also knew that now was not the time for him to be stunned. If the enemy in front of him did not solve it, even if his heart was worried about Ichigo, it would not improve his condition. And you have to have confidence in one protector, that guy. In the end, it will be all right. Because he is such a man. Ah, yes. When she heard Rinji words, Rukia's heart was slightly put down. Indeed, Ichigo was such a reassuring guy, even if something she did not know happened to him now, but as long as she asked him after the end of this battle. I didn't expect Rinji you to know so much about Ichigo. When did you establish such a deep trust? Putting down the worry in her heart, Rukia opened her mouth and teased Rinji. Where is there any deep trust between me and that guy? Hearing Rukia's tease, Renji's face changed slightly and quickly denied. Is it the support from Soul Society? Baragan glanced in the direction of Tushira Hitsugaya and the others. His subordinates were already in front of them the moment they appeared. There was no need to worry about any impact on their battle situation. Although the battle on his side was meaningless. Roar roar. Kurosaki Ichigo let out an unknown roar. He held Zanpakuto in his hand and flashed beside Baragan in a strange manner. In his hand, Zanpakuto was wrapped in a ball of black Ryuryoku, full of a depressing feeling. It's useless, little brat. I already said that with your strength, you won't be able to cause me any harm. He didn't even take out his weapon. He didn't even move his feet. Baragan just stood there and stretched out his palm. Kurosaki Ichigo's seemingly powerful slash was easily blocked by Baragan with his bare hands. And before this kind of situation had happened many times. The difference in strength is actually so big. In the battle, Kisuke took a look at the situation on Kurosaki Ichigo's side. His eyes revealed a bit of worry. On the body of Kurosaki Ichigo in the intangible state. Even he felt a bit shocked. Moreover, because of the blur, Kurosaki Ichigo's fighting style had changed greatly. That kind of wild fighting style made him even more difficult to deal with. He didn't expect that in this state, he would be so powerless in the face of the number 2 Espada. Let alone forcing out his true ability, he couldn't even make others light their blades. Boom! At this moment, a yellow pillar of light suddenly ran down from the sky, wrapping up several broken surfaces in the modern realm. Even the guy who had been beaten half disabled before was not spared. Negation. Looking at the Arrancar in front of him who was wrapped up, Chura Hitsugaya and several others who had experienced it once shouted at the same time, and they did not expect that Aizen actually used the same method. Suddenly withdrawing from the battlefield, and in the case of having a little advantage, that did not fight seriously at all, so this means that the purpose of their battle has been achieved. Kisuke was surprised and bewildered. It seems that the purpose has been achieved. Surrounded by negation, Baragan looked around and said. He did not mind that the information on his side would be obtained by the enemy. Sure enough. Kisuke's heart suddenly jumped. He felt as if something bad had happened. Goodbye, interesting human youth. Although he is still very young, I have to say that he is an interesting guy. He folded his arms across his chest and slowly rose after the golden light of the negation. Baragan's tone was as arrogant as ever. TSK. He actually ran away. Putting away his own Zanpakuto, Ikika's tone was very dissatisfied. He had clearly become excited, but in the end, there was no battle. Damn it! Looking at the rising Arrancar in front of him, Chura Hitsugaya became pale, and he was once again played like this, then the arrival of himself and others is meaningless? Is all this in your calculations, Aizen? Restrictions are lifted. At this moment, the announcement of 12th Division came from the headset of Kakado, and at the same time, a team emblem flashed on the chest of several people who were previously limited by Ryuryoku. The battle has ended. Matsumoto Ranjaku said softly, and her heart was a little depressed. Although she was not a good fighter like Ikaku, such a fierce battle made her very unhappy. Roar! Just as everyone was thinking about different things, a roar came from the side. At the same time, there was a powerful Ryuryoku, the heavy and unknown Ryuryoku. Is that Ichigo? Looking at the figure in the distance, Renji said with some uncertainty in his tone. The mask on his face, the shell made of unknown material, and the wagging tail behind him. No matter how you looked at it, it was a hollow. Was such a thing really Ichigo? Oh no, I didn't expect that the hollowification has already progressed to such a degree. Seeing what happened to Kurosaki Ichigo, Hirako Shinji said in surprise. Although he had already expected it when Ichigo went berserk in the previous battle, he did not expect that Kurosaki Ichigo's hollowification would go to such a degree. It seemed that the hollow in his body was stronger than he imagined. Although I don't know what happened to Ichigo, if it becomes like this, I should knock him out first. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo had changed his form, Ikiku said loudly, and then put Zanpakuto and the scabbard in his hand together. Extend, Hozukimaru. Holding Zanpakuto who had changed into a long spear in his hand, Ikiku fiercely kicked in the air and flew in the direction of Ichigo. Roar! With a roar, Kurosaki Ichigo stretched out his hand and effortlessly grabbed the Hozukimaru from the corner of the eye. He clenched his 5 fingers and swung his arm. The corner of the eye flew in the direction he came from at a faster speed than before. 63 Dao Binding Chains, bind. With a tap of his feet, Kisuke appeared beside Kurosaki Ichigo. 65 Dao Binding Chains, 5 Pillars of Iron. With a boom, 5 giant iron pillars descended from the sky and pressed Kurosaki Ichigo down. The moment Kurosaki Ichigo was pressed down, Kisuke and Shinji moved and almost instantly appeared next to Kurosaki Ichigo's head. The Zanpakuto in their hands was accurately inserted between his mask. Kacha. With a few sounds, the mask on Kurosaki Ichigo's face was removed. Then the white unknown substance on his body slowly fell off, and his eyes gradually regained clarity. Woo! At the same time when his eyes regained clarity, Kurosaki Ichigo felt a great pain coming from his body. At the same time, an indescribable feeling appeared in his mind. Before he could see his surroundings clearly, Kurosaki Ichigo fainted again. It seems that Mr. Ichigo has temporarily stabilized. I will leave the rest of the matters to you, Mr. Shinji. I understand. Looking at Kurosaki Ichigo who had fallen to the ground, Hirako Shinji replied softly. Through the battle just now, he had already felt Kurosaki Ichigo's powerful potential. The hollow in his body was also much stronger than he expected. If he could get exercise, in the final battle, he would have another powerful combat power. And most importantly, Ichigo did not have Aizen's Kaika Suigetsu. Then, let's talk about other things now. Kisuke's tone suddenly became a little low, and his eyes turned to the other side of Hitsugaya and others. If it is convenient, can you talk about your experience in Dangai? Moreover, I don't know how Mr. Kimura is. Is that so? According to what you said, Mr. Kimura was swallowed by the Tatsu, right? Sitting in the store, Kisuke put down the teacup in his hand and asked Hitsugaya. In the battle, several Arrancar suddenly evacuated. After solving the protection of the berserk state of hollowification, Kisuke and his party were all concentrated in the Urahara shop, and Hitsugaya also explained the situation of Muyang, who he saw at the last moment, being detained and swallowed by the crowd. It is actually Tatsu. After listening to Hitsugaya's words, Abarai Renji's face is full of heaviness. Although he has not really faced it, Renji also knows that that kind of thing is impossible for Shinigami to solve. So far, he has never heard of anyone escaping from that. Well, leave the next thing to me. Hitsugaya Captain, you will continue your own task. As for Mr. Ichigo, I'm counting on you Mr. Shinji. Please make sure that he has enough strength before the last war. I know without you saying. Hirako Shinji glanced at Kurosaki Ichigo lying on the side and stood up. Since we're done, he'll be leaving first. As for Ichigo, you can ask him to come find us when he wakes up. He knows the place. What? Don't you want to bring him back now? Kisuke covered his mouth with his fan and said with a hint of confusion in his eyes. There's no need. Let him decide this himself. But I don't have time to wait for him to wake up now. The people in the store are still waiting for me to explain it to them. Waving his hand, Hirako Shinji pulled open the door of Kisuke and walked out. That, Mr. Hirako. Ah. Don't worry about Mr. Kimura, I will find a solution as soon as possible. I wasn't worried at all. Hirako Shinji said in a light tone, turned his head and waved to Kisuke, with a careless look on his face. Although I would also think that Kimura would encounter something bad. But if it was that guy, everything would be fine no matter what happened, at least we always believed in him. Hearing Hirako Shinji's words, Kisuke's body slightly paused, and then his face revealed a heartfelt smile. Well, that's it. I'm leaving. Putting his hand in his pocket, Hirako Shinji slowly walked toward their stronghold. His face was still indifferent, but there was a deep worry in the depths of his eyes. You must not have an accident, Kimura. Who is this guy, Mr. Kisuke? Seeing that Hirako Shinji figure was getting farther and farther away, Renji turned his head and asked Kisuke. Previously, he had felt that this person's identity was strange. This was because he had never asked. Now that he saw that Hirako Shinji had left, he could not help but ask. Well, if Renji asks this, I am also very curious about the identity of this person. Although we did not participate in the battle before, but from the situation we saw at the scene, this guy's strength is enormous. If we fight face to face, I am not sure to win. Hearing Renji's question, Chur Hitsugaya touched his chin and said, from the traces of Ryuryoku left on the scene, Hirako Shinji's strength is absolutely the same level as him, a real captain level. This person, Mr. Ichigo should know it. Kisuke did not answer, but turned his eyes to the opposite corner of Ichigo. Ah, I do have an impression of this person. Ichigo touched his own Zanpakuto, staring at the cup in front of him, and said in a low voice, 100 years ago, he was the captain of Godai 13th, 5th Division, and is a very powerful old qualified captain. 5th Division Captain. Hearing the introduction of Ichigo, the faces of several people around him moved. Isn't 5th Division the division where Aizen is? 100 years ago. Ah. Lifting his eyes to glance at the surrounding people, Ichigo continued to say, at that time, Aizen was his vice-captain. Then why did he? After hearing the words of Ichigo, Renji only felt that there were more and more questions in his brain, and he was going to ask Ichigo. Pa! Pa! Clapping his hands and interrupting Renji's words, Kisuke saw that everyone focused on himself and said, the memories of the past will stop first. What we are going to discuss now is about Aizen, and the task you have to achieve in human world this time. Are you saying that Kimura has been captured and swallowed? In Anding District, after listening to Hirako Shinji's report, Hiyori suddenly slammed the table and stared at Hirako Shinji. Well, in any case, that 10th Division captain said so. 10th Division. Hearing the words spoken by Hirako Shinji, Love raised his head. Is it because of the little brat that Kimura stayed in Soul Society for so long? Is it because he is the captain of 10th Division? It is indeed possible for you to say so. After all, he is your own junior. It is natural to take care of him. Rose lifted his long hair and said lightly. What are you two talking about? We are now discussing the matter of Kimura being caught and devoured. Don't focus on other places, Baldy. I heard that the current captain of the 10th Division is still a child. It is said that Soul Society is a genius that only appears once in 100 years. Ignoring Hiyori's roar, Lisa pushed her glasses and said. What? A mere brat can become a captain? Soul Society is getting more and more useless. What are you all talking about? Kimura is gone now. That is something that Shinigami cannot fight against. Kimura, he. Don't panic, Hiyori. With a low shout, Hiyori was awakened from her anxiety and frustration. Hirako Shinji looked straight into her eyes and said, "You have to have confidence in Kimura. That guy will not be killed by a mere thing like that." But, although he heard what Hirako Shinji said, Hiyori was still unable to feel relieved. "Well, if you continue to worry like this, you will look down on Kimura. As friends, at this time, what we have to do is to believe him and welcome him with a smile when he comes back." Humph. After a cold snort, Hiyori shook off the palm that Hirako Shinji placed on his shoulder. With his hands on his waist, he strode toward the backyard with a face full of displeasure. "Forget it, I don't care about you, and so does Kimura.